Hey guys. Here is part 2 of What If Naruto Saved Haku. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 5, Welcome Home. And that's how it is. Kakashi concluded his report. I see. The Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi, sighed. He pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling the beginnings of a headache coming on. When Kakashi had requested a private debriefing, something usually reserved for B-rank missions or above, the Sandaime had felt a sense of foreboding. When Naruto trailed in after Kakashi, the aging Hokage had been pleasantly surprised. Sarutobi had feared that something had happened to him or his teammates to prompt Kakashi's unusual request. He was even more surprised, and a little worried, to see Naruto being followed not by his teammates, but by a beautiful girl that he had never seen before. The story that unfolded saddened Sarutobi, but it also made him immensely proud of Team 7's accomplishments. It was an extraordinary feat for a genin team, especially a rookie one, to take on an A-rank mission and not only survive but succeed as well. Sarutobi studied the girl in front of him, frowning. It was a highly unusual situation, but not an unprecedented one. Nations had gone to war over defecting shinobi, and every new Chunin that joined another village was a point of conflict. The protection of a hidden village's secrets and techniques was of paramount importance, and it was dangerous to harbor another nation's shinobi, former or not. Haku was not truly a new Chunin, for she had never been a shinobi of the Mist or of any other village in the first place. But she had been the right hand of one of the Mist's most infamous criminals, and she had acted against Konoha shinobi, possibly with lethal intent. That she had seemingly switched sides was suspicious. Moreover, she had aligned herself not with Konoha but with Naruto specifically. To the Sandaime, that was even more suspicious. Any competent ninja that bothered to spend enough time observing the boy would be able to find out how much he craved attention and affection. Naruto would easily accept anyone who provided those things. That made Naruto the weakest link in Team 7 for a potential infiltrator to exploit. Even if she was genuine in her intentions, there was a host of other problems to deal with. He could not simply grant her citizenship, or offer her a place amongst Konoha's military. Kanahigaku no Sato was a ninja village, the largest concentration of military might within the country of fire, and security was of supreme importance. And yet, Konoha's Sandaime Hokage had always been a sentimental man at heart, even if war and conflict had forced him to bury it. Just as old age had weakened his limbs and eroded his stamina, it also sapped the ruthlessness that was required of the Hokage. Sarutobi didn't want to cause Naruto any more suffering if he could help it, and the boy had found another precious person. He was at an impasse. He took a deep, meditative puff on his pipe and eyed the three ninja in front of him. Kakashi stood casually, having long since relaxed from attention, but alertly. Naruto slouched to his teacher's left, his face a mixture of boredom and impatience. The blonde had been nervous when he had entered the Hokage's office, a rare sight, but boredom had long since conquered his apprehension. On Naruto's left, and slightly behind, Sarutobi noted, stood the girl. At first glance she appeared demure, graceful, and delicate. But there was a subtle poise, a sharpness about her that screamed shinobi. "Your name is Haku, correct?" Sarutobi asked abruptly. The girl tilted her head, sending a sidelong glance at Naruto. "Yes," she replied politely after several moments. "What do you think of Konoha?" Haku blinked. "It's very nice," she murmured. "It's peaceful here," she continued, sounding almost puzzled. "And the people are very different from what I'm used to seeing." Content, she didn't say. Trusting, well-fed, prosperous. Kirigakure no Sato was nothing like Konoha, and its people seemed to be direct opposites of their leaf counterparts. Truthfully, she had not imagined a shinobi village could be like Konoha. "I'm starting to see why it can produce a ninja like Naruto." She smiled at that thought. "Yes," the Sandaime agreed. "We operate in a very different manner than the Mist, so it's natural that our villages are so different." He wondered why she was smiling. "Do you like it here?" "Do I like it here?" Haku wondered. They had walked straight from the gates to the Hokage's office, and while she liked what she had seen, she hadn't experienced enough of Konoha to form a solid impression. Though the Hokage was startlingly nice and approachable, another positive change from the Mist, she wasn't fooled into thinking that he was anything close to weak or soft. The Mizukage was a ruthless ninja whose strength was much like that of the tsunamis that adorned the murals on the walls of his office. He was as cold and indifferent to the plights of his people as the giant, terrifying waves that he was often compared to. His coldness made him seem cruel, but in truth he simply didn't care whether they lived or died as long as they stayed loyal and supported Kirigakure. If they became disloyal, they were dealt with permanently, and with extreme prejudice, so as to discourage others from following in their footsteps. Zabuza-san had been relentlessly trailed by the Mist Hunter Ning because he had survived despite his failed coup, which angered the Mizukage almost as much as the rebellion itself. Haku remembered countless days spent evading the Mist Hunters, fearing for their lives, fighting desperately to survive against ninja that had the backing of one of the 5 great powers. She forced her thoughts away from those memories and turned her mind back to the Hokage's question. Konoha seemed warm, bright, and cheerful for a hidden village. But there was undoubtedly a darker side that she had not glimpsed beneath the sunny surface. All shinobi villages had a dark side, it was simply a matter of scale. There was also something she had seen that bothered her greatly. As they had walked through the village, Haku had observed an oddity. Most of the villagers seemed to look away from them as they passed. Many others just ignored them, as if they could not see Team 7. Not Team 7, she had realized. Naruto. Then she had seen their eyes. When they did look at Naruto, their eyes were incredibly cold. Those eyes, they're the same. Seeing their eyes had brought forth chilling memories of Kirigakure. It's the same. Naruto-sama. Not everyone had ignored him or looked at him with those eyes, but many had. To Haku, who had experienced much the same thing in the back alleys of Kirigakure, it was painful to see such looks directed towards the boy who had saved her. Naruto had told her about his burden. She knew that he was the container of the Kyubi no Kitsune. Perhaps if she had faced a monster during its last rampage 12 years ago, she might have been afraid. But Haku had seen enough of Naruto's inner feelings to know that he was not the demon fox. No demon would have jumped into her ice mirrors to save a rival. A demon wouldn't have hesitated to kill her, wouldn't have shed tears over the death of an enemy. A demon wouldn't have understood her pain. The prejudice is the same, even here. In the country of water, people had hated the bearers of bloodline limits with an unreasoning fervor born of fear, because such ninja had wrought so much slaughter during the most recent civil war. The people of Konoha apparently bore that same inner ugliness towards Naruto, the only living relic of the monster that had caused so much destruction and death. It made her angry to see Naruto being unfairly blamed for something that wasn't his fault, much like she had been held responsible for the sins of her ancestors, people she had never known despite the blood they shared. Haku took a deep breath and forced herself to relax as she realized that her muscles had unconsciously tensed due to her agitation. She realized that the others in the room were looking at her expectantly. "No," Haku said quietly. Naruto started and looked at her incredulously. "I'm sorry, Naruto-sama, but I don't like the way they treat you." "No?" Sarutobi questioned mildly. "Why don't you like it here?" Inwardly he was frowning. To a person used to Kirigakure no Sato or a life on the run, Konoha should have seemed very pleasant. Most spies would not answer that question with a no, but if she is not a spy, then what reason would she have for disliking the village at first glance? Haku paused uncertainly. Should I tell the truth and risk offending the Hokage? She looked over at Naruto, only to find him gazing back questioningly. She smiled suddenly, drawing strength from his earnest concern. Naruto-sama has nothing but good things to say about the Sandaime. I will trust him. When I walked through the village earlier, I noticed the way they looked at Naruto-sama, Haku said quietly. Those eyes. She trailed off. The Hokage sighed wearily and adjusted the brim of his hat. I see. It was a bitter reminder of Konoha's, and the Sandaime's, shame, not Uzumaki Naruto, as many would like to believe, but rather their treatment of him. A total outsider had noticed it within minutes of setting foot in the village. Yondaime, he thought mournfully, glancing at his successor's picture, I've failed both you and your legacy. He was too old, too soft, and he had let too many things slide. Naruto had not had the proper childhood that Sarutobi had wanted for the boy, and much of that was his fault. He had let the villagers and the council get away with too much concerning their treatment of Naruto, and it was years too late to fix it. But it looks like this girl is genuine, he thought, turning his mind away from his failure. It was more of a feeling than any real proof, but that was enough for Sarutobi to decide to at least let her stay in Konoha. After all, intuition was an important tool in any ninja's arsenal. What were you planning on doing after you accompanied Naruto here? I had hoped to remain with him. Haku replied neutrally, but her eyes flashed with emotion. The Sandaime chuckled. I understand. He smiled. It was the first time he had seen the girl exhibit any spirit. That stubborn spark in her eyes told him that she was going to remain by Naruto's side, no matter what he told her to do. He still did not have all the pieces to understand why she was so determined to follow Naruto, nor why she seemed to respect him so much, but even so he could see that the two shared a deep bond. They understand each other, he mused. When she mentioned the contempt in the villagers' eyes, it seemed like she was familiar with it. It made sense. How else could two totally different people seem to bond so rapidly, and so deeply? They shared a very unique and very painful experience, and it was likely the first time either Haku or Naruto had encountered someone that they could relate to so strongly. It was that last realization that prompted him to make the decision. Sarutobi rose to his feet and smiled a grandfatherly smile at Haku. "Welcome to Konoha," he said warmly. Haku looked stunned, but Naruto whooped happily and slapped her on the back. She staggered forward at the blow, but when she turned to look at the blonde it was with a smile. "Thank you," she told the Sandaime sincerely. With the pleasantries out of the way, the Sandaime quickly began to consider the details of the situation. "Unfortunately, given your past, I cannot grant you full citizenship immediately. You will be watched by the Anbu, and your actions will be monitored and recorded. I cannot allow you unrestricted access to the village, so you will need to be accompanied by an escort for the time being." The Sandaime paused and regarded the girl. "Do you understand so far?" "Yes." "I don't," Naruto said angrily. "Why does she have to be watched like a criminal all of the time?" Naruto. Kakashi, who had been silent since the completion of his report, sighed and spoke up. "Just think about it. Less than 2 months ago she was the right hand of Zabuza, who was an A-ranked criminal from the mist. Even worse, she fought against us and tried to kill our client." "But you're a ninja, aren't you?" Kakashi interrupted sharply. "You should understand how important security is for us. If an enemy nation got a hold of some of the secrets kept in this village, it could lead to the deaths of hundreds of Konohanin, if not outright war." The Jounin paused and tilted his head slightly. "You of all people should know," he continued, "given how Mizuki duped you into stealing the scroll of forbidden seals." Naruto flinched. That was what? What do you think would have happened if he had succeeded in stealing the scroll? He wanted power, but he would not have gotten far alone. He would have taken it and sold it to our enemies, in return for money and perhaps Jounin rank. If an enemy nation got their hands on that scroll, they would be able to use some of Konoha's most dangerous and powerful techniques against us. "I understand," Naruto said finally, his eyes lowered. After a moment, his head came back up. "But Haku's not like that," he said firmly. "She wouldn't do that." "Naruto-sama." The girl in question was touched by his stubborn defense of her. She understood why the Sandaime had to put her under surveillance, and accepted it. As long as she could remain near Naruto, she could accept Konoha's suspicion. "Even if she wouldn't, we can't just risk it," Kakashi told his student, exasperation entering his voice. "Our security would be worthless if we allowed everyone whom we believed to be trustworthy to move unwatched and unchecked." Still, Naruto's protests trailed off as he felt a slim hand on his shoulder. He turned to look at Haku. "Thank you, Naruto-sama." She smiled gratefully. "But it's all right. I knew that something like this would happen, and I accepted that when I decided to come here with you." She squeezed his shoulder lightly before retracting her hand. "It's all right," she repeated. Naruto still looked ready to protest, but after a moment he seemed to consider her words. Finally, he nodded and allowed himself to relax. Sarutobi coughed, bringing their attention back to him. "Now that the matter is settled, there are a few more things we need to discuss." He turned his gaze to the silver-haired Jounin. "Kakashi." "Yes, Hokage-sama?" Kakashi asked, stepping forward. "From your report, Team 7's mission evolved from a C-rank escort mission to an A-rank bodyguard mission, is that correct?" "Yes." The Jounin nodded. "Since Momochi Zabuza was an A-rank nukenin in the bingo book, it was definitely more difficult than a B-rank mission that the Aniki Odai's attack implied." Sarutobi sighed. Hidden villages often had clients who lied about the difficulty or the circumstances behind their requests, but rarely was the danger level so dramatically different. Despite detailed evaluations, occasionally there were requests that slipped through the net, but each one seemed like an affront to the Hokage. An A-rank mission slipping through in the guise of a C-rank was like a slap to the face, but it was done and there was little that he could do about it. "Unfortunately, we were only paid for a C-rank mission, so I cannot pay you as if it were an A-rank. I can offer a bonus, but only enough for it to be equivalent to a B-rank mission's pay." "I understand," was all Kakashi said in response. Naruto, on the other hand, looked ready to leap into the air and cheer. To Naruto, the pay from a B-rank mission would be more money than he had ever at once. Back when he still had his stipend, the pay would probably have equaled several months' worth of payments. The Hokage smiled at the boy's happy expression, but guilt soon reared its ugly head in his thoughts. Naruto's stipend had been quite generous for a young orphan boy, but then most orphans were taken in by other relatives or adopted in short order. Konoha was a shinobi village, and it had many orphans. Nearly every family lost members to enemy action at some point, which was why adoption was so commonplace in the village. Many had lost family members themselves, and most were more than willing to help the children who had lost their parents. That was how it was, but for a few exceptions. Naruto was one such exception. He had no relatives and no one would adopt him. No family that was capable of raising a well-adjusted child would take Naruto into their home, and the older he got the more unlikely the possibility became. Thus, Naruto had become one of the few orphans in Konoha that had to pay for things that most children his age took for granted. Naruto was now an active-duty ninja and had to pay for all of his equipment and training tools. Nor could the Hokage pay for his rent or utilities any longer, since all active-duty ninja were considered to be adults in the eyes of the law, no matter their age. Shinobi were not covered by any of the civilian welfare programs. There were some exceptions, but Naruto was not one of them. Becoming a genin had actually set Naruto back financially, despite the pay he had received from taking D-rank missions. The pay from the mission to the wave would give Naruto's funds a substantial boost and take him out of the red, even after he paid back his outstanding debts. Now, on to the matter of lodging, the Sandaime said, once it seemed like Naruto had regained control of himself enough to listen. Lodging? Naruto echoed. You will be allowed 1 week to secure accommodations for yourself, the Hokage told Haku. Until then, you can stay in a hotel free of charge. After 1 week, if you have not yet found a place to stay, you will have to start paying for the hotel room. Haku shook her head. The Sandaime raised an eyebrow. This is not acceptable? No, it is acceptable, Haku replied. But I already have a place to stay. You do? Naruto asked curiously. Haku looked at him, surprised. I don't? You just said. Naruto trailed off in confusion. Huh? He asked finally, scratching his head. Haku lowered her head, studying her feet intently. Forgive me, she said finally. I had assumed that I would stay with you. Seconds ticked by in silence. After a while, Haku looked up only to see Naruto frozen in shock, his mouth hanging open. Naruto-sama? His mouth worked, but no sound emerged for several moments. Are you sure? Naruto asked finally, quietly. To Haku, Naruto had an almost vulnerable look that she had not seen on him before. But why? Yes. She nodded, smiling uncertainly. Kakashi, who had been silently watching the exchange, cleared his throat. It isn't really appropriate, he said slowly. The Jounin struggled to keep his face impassive. Truthfully, he found the entire situation incredibly amusing. The way this is going, maybe I can write my own addition to the Ika Ika series soon, he thought gleefully, his perverted mind reeling with the possibilities. But there was a small sliver of worry in him as well. Haku would have many more chances to harm Naruto if they lived together. Naruto ignored Kakashi. He stared at Haku searchingly for several more moments. To have someone to come home to welcome him, to share his meals with, to share his life with, it was an old dream of his, one that had filled his heart with bitter longing. The abrupt possibility that he could have that had suddenly emerged in front of him, and he wanted to grasp it desperately. But why would she want to live with me? She had repeatedly stated her intentions to follow him, but he hadn't imagined that she had meant it so literally. There were other places she could stay, places that were close to his apartment, especially since rooms in his building were quite cheap due to his presence there. It was starting to dawn on him just how much Haku clung to him. Already more than 2 months had passed since Zabuza's death, but Haku still feared to let Naruto out of her sight. He wondered what would happen when he started performing missions again. Yet, while all of her actions and words indicated that she wouldn't leave him, Naruto still feared, still doubted. It was too good to be true. One day, Haku would realize that he had nothing to offer her, and she would leave. No use worrying about it right now, he decided. It's all right. If you're sure you want to stay with me. Haku's smile brightened. Yes. Naruto. Kakashi sounded exasperated. I guess that it's been decided. Sarutobi chuckled. Normally, he would have felt the same as Kakashi about the matter. But Naruto had been so alone and the Sandaime felt that having company would be good for the boy. Of course, he hadn't discarded the possibility that the girl was still an enemy. He was taking a gamble that this would improve Naruto's well-being. In any case, the Anbu would be watching. Naruto himself was hardly helpless, especially since it seemed like the Kyuubi would take an active interest if Naruto's life was hanging by a thread. That is all for now, the Sandaime said once his chuckles had died down. Naruto, I trust that you will have no problem showing Haku around? He phrased it as a question, but from the Sandaime Hokage even rhetorical questions were often taken as orders. Of course, this went completely over Naruto's head. Of course. Naruto gave the Sandaime a vaguely insulted look. Then we'll take our leave, Hokage-sama, Kakashi said respectfully. Sarutobi grunted in acknowledgement and watched thoughtfully as the trio left his office. When the door clicked shut, the Sandaime Hokage stood from his chair and moved to gaze out the window behind him. He stared at the stone faces of the Hokage meditatively. Was that all right, Yondaime? Naruto was grinning broadly as he dragged Haku after him. He was enthusiastically showing Haku around the village, starting with his favorite landmarks. Ichiraku was their very first and longest stop. Hey Akin, 2 bowls of miso ramen! You're back! Ayam exclaimed happily. The stand's income had been lower than usual for the 2.5 months that Naruto had been away. Besides, the stand just wasn't the same without Naruto's presence. His cheerfulness, his boundless enthusiasm for ramen, his atrocious table manners, and his childish antics never failed to bring a smile to her face. Only 2? Tochi wondered. We don't have a lot of time, Naruto explained regretfully. I have to finish showing her around. Ayam and Tochi both took notice of the girl standing behind Naruto. Who's this? Ayam asked curiously. My name is Haku, the girl in question said politely and inclined her head in greeting. She warily eyed the father and daughter. Rationally, Haku knew that they had no reason to harm her, but her old instincts had been clamoring ever since they had entered Konoha. She hadn't disguised herself again since the day Zabuza died, but now, in a crowded, foreign shinobi village, she was dearly feeling the lack. She's going to be living in the village from now on, so I'm showing her around, Naruto put in. Well then. Tochi finished filling 2 bowls of miso ramen. Your first bowl is on the house. Ayam deftly took the bowls and set them in front of the 2 ninja. Ah, really? Free ramen was one of Naruto's favorite things in the world. Thanks, Sakin! Naruto pulled apart a set of disposable chopsticks with an audible crack. Itadakimasu! Haku watched Naruto tear into his bowl with amusement, and not a little amazement. She had never seen anyone eat so enthusiastically before. Naruto abruptly stopped eating, noodles still hanging out of his mouth, and turned to look at her. He swallowed the hanging noodles with a wet slurp. What? Haku blinked. It's nothing, she said. Then eat before it gets cold, Naruto urged. Haku nodded, smiling, and reached for a pair of chopsticks. It's good, she murmured quietly after taking her first bite. Naruto nodded happily, his mouth full to the bursting again. The boy finished his bowl quickly and couldn't resist ordering another. By the time Haku finished her miso ramen, Naruto had eaten 2 more bowls. Haku set down her utensils, wincing slightly as Naruto burped contentedly beside her. His manners are rough. It was another thing she resolved to help him with. A Kage needed to be dignified and diplomatic, and Naruto would need a lot of help to gain those qualities. Naruto pulled out his nearly bursting frog wallet, or Gamachan, as he affectionately called it, and quickly pulled out several bills. Thanks for the meal! He hopped out of the bar stool and grinned at Haku. Let's go! Haku smiled back, feeling his infectious enthusiasm taking hold within her once again. Yes, Naruto-sama. Haku's tour of Konohagakure no Sato accelerated rapidly from there. Even so, it was sunset before they began to slow down. They returned back towards the inner city from the outskirts at a much more casual pace, and deep shadows had grown long across the streets by the time they made it Ichiraku for the final stop of Haku's informal tour of the city. Naruto gulped down several more bowls of ramen for dinner, and Haku had a surprisingly pleasant discussion with Ayam about Konoha's various districts. Her chat with the older girl was a novel experience for Haku. She had never really conversed with other women about normal topics with no hidden agendas. There was no mission to complete, no mission-critical information to be gleaned. For once she was just talking with a girl near her own age for no other reason than to make conversation. It wasn't something she had really done since before the death of her parents, and it felt nice. Come back any time, Ayam called, waving after Haku and Naruto as they left the stand. Haku blinked rapidly, her eyes wet. She couldn't bring herself to call back and instead only nodded. It was an earnest offer, and she had had few enough of those in her lifetime. I'll come back, Haku promised silently. Naruto led her through a winding series of back streets and alleys until they finally came to a stop in front of a large, red-roofed apartment building. Naruto paused in front of the main entrance uncertainly. Nervous jitters boiled in his gut. He wondered what she would think of his apartment. It was quite a large apartment for a single person, but for 2 it would be somewhat cramped. His home was also dirty, chaotic, and sparsely furnished. Naruto knew that his housekeeping skills were subpar at best, but he had never had to worry about it before. Suddenly he felt embarrassed about his own home, a feeling he had never felt before. However, Naruto was quite used to embarrassment, and quickly quashed the feeling. He marched up the stairs with Haku trailing after him. Naruto was unlocking his door with a flourish when his insecurity got the better of him again. He froze with the door only partially open, and through the crack he could see an empty ramen cup lying on the floor. "Naruto-sama?" Haku asked, puzzled by his strange behavior. Naruto turned to look at her. "Just wait here for a sec," Naruto ordered quickly before darting in his apartment, and yanking the door shut behind him. Haku stared at the scratched wooden door uncertainly. "What's wrong?" Haku wondered. Several loud noises sounded in quick succession behind the door, and then Haku could hear Naruto curse and heard the sound of Kage Bunshin being created. Worried, Haku set her hand on the doorknob. She paused. "He told me to wait," she remembered. "It does not sound like a battle," Haku reasoned, "and he wanted me to wait outside." Her hand fell from the knob. The sounds, the result of Naruto conducting his cleaning operations, which he would later come to name as the War on Dust, continued unabated for several more minutes. The commotion stopped as abruptly as it had started, and a panting Naruto threw open the door to his apartment. Haku flinched back slightly startled, before meeting Naruto's triumphant gaze. "Come in." Naruto made a welcoming gesture. "Yes." Haku assented, stepping forward. She hesitated at the threshold. It had not really occurred to her that she would be sharing a home with Naruto. She had known from the very beginning that she would follow him wherever he went, but it suddenly occurred to her that she hadn't really understood all that implied. Home. It had been so long since there had been a place that Haku could truly call home. Home had been wherever Zabuza-san had been, but even so there was an undeniable allure to having a place to come back to. Her first home had been with her parents, in the farmlands of the country of water. There had been a stream nearby, and the hills had teemed with wildlife. Some of Haku's happiest memories were of roaming the hills, chasing rabbits and climbing trees. But at the end of the day she had always returned back home, to the small house, more of a shack than anything else, that she had shared with her mother and her father. The home they had shared, until that fateful day. It was surely long gone now, destroyed by the icy explosion that had marked the full awakening of her bloodline. She nearly jumped when a hand came down upon her shoulder. Haku looked up, shaken from her reverie. Naruto smiled at her reassuringly. "It's all right." Haku nodded, blinking back tears for the second time that day. She took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold. There was no sense of meaning or feeling that hit her as she stepped fully into her new home yet. "I'm home," she whispered to the dull white walls. A potted plant rustled, limp and half dead, stirred by some unseen wind. Beneath her feet she could hear the soft squeaks of the floorboards, and beneath that the deeper voice of the building groaning. The apartment smelled like cleaning chemicals, dust, and Naruto. The door clicked shut behind her, and a moment later she could hear the sound of locks sliding into place. Naruto patted around her to stand in the kitchenette before turning around and grinning at her. Haku found herself grinning back, even as the wetness in her eyes overflowed and spilled down her cheeks. "Welcome home." Naruto woke to the sounds of sizzling. Sleepy befuddlement clouded his mind for a moment before alarm set in. Slowly, cautiously, he reached for the kunai hidden beneath his pillow. The moment he felt the hard, weathered grip, Naruto leapt out of bed, prepared to fight for his life. He was not prepared to see Haku making breakfast in his kitchen. "You're awake," Haku noticed. "Good morning, Naruto-sama." Naruto couldn't help but grin in response. He had never known that a simple good morning could sound so sweet. That's right, the events of yesterday flooded back into his mind. "I don't live alone anymore." "What are you making?" Naruto asked curiously. "Eggs," she replied. Haku frowned at him. "I noticed that there is hardly anything to eat here, so I had to go out and get some." She still wasn't used to being amidst so many people without her disguise, and she had half expected to be accosted. Luckily, there was a grocer right across the street, but even so her outing had been an uncomfortable one. Naruto's reassuring presence at her side yesterday had made more of a difference than she had thought. "Sorry," Naruto said sheepishly. He had been gone for 2 months, yet it hadn't occurred to him that his food situation would need addressing. Cup ramen lasted for a long time. Naruto retreated to the bathroom, shaking his head at the strange morning he was having. He paused. It was a strange situation due in part to how normal it was. "Is this what it's like to have a family to greet you in the morning?" Naruto wondered wistfully. All his life, he had yearned for that kind of normality. Finally, it seemed as if it was close enough to grasp. Maybe, just maybe, he had found someone precious that he could call family. Naruto smiled at the thought as he began to wash up in preparation for the day ahead. Naruto nearly wept tears of joy as he tore into his first homemade breakfast, made by someone other than himself. He gobbled up the plain breakfast as if it were the most delicious thing ever. Finally he laid his utensils down, burped in satisfaction, and hopped to his feet. "Let's go!" "Eh? But the dishes," Haku protested. "Who cares? Your tour isn't finished yet." With that said, he grabbed the girl and dragged her from the apartment. "Wait!" she yelped, flustered. Naruto skidded to a halt just outside his front door. "What?" Haku blushed. "I'm not dressed," she whispered. Naruto blinked and looked at her white yukata. "What's wrong with that?" he wondered. Haku gave him a look that was eerily similar to the one Sakura gave him when he said something even stupider than usual. "Okay," Naruto said cautiously. "Maybe you should change your clothes." Haku nodded, smiling, and Naruto relaxed. 5 minutes later, Haku was dressed in the pink kimono that Tsunami had given her, and the two set out to see the sights once more. Naruto's frantic enthusiasm had cooled a bit since the day before, which meant that Haku's second tour was relatively leisurely in comparison. Naruto led her around the city, pointing out various things that he thought might catch her interest. He also tended to have an amusing tale regarding nearly every place in the city, and his wildly exaggerated stories kept Haku smiling for the entire duration of her tour. At lunch, they once again backtracked to Ichiraku. They had just finished ordering when the flap to the stall was pulled aside. "Welcome!" "I am," and Tucci said automatically. "Hi, Akin," said the newcomer. It was said in a tone so eerily like Naruto's that Haku couldn't help but turn in her seat to regard the speaker. "Ah," the young boy pointed in surprise. "Naruto Naikin!" "Konohamaru!" Naruto greeted happily. "When did you get back?" Konohamaru demanded. "How was your mission? Did you fight? Did you beat up any ninja? Did you—" Slow down, Konohamaru," Naruto interjected, smiling. Haku studied him. Suddenly, Naruto seemed more mature somehow. Is it because he is dealing with younger children? "The mission was a success." Naruto grinned, flashing a thumbs up at Konohamaru. "But more importantly, who are those two?" There were two children, a boy and a girl of about Konohamaru's age, shyly lurking behind the curtains. "Huh!" Konohamaru blinked. "Oh!" The Hokage's grandson reached through the curtain and grabbed the two by the arms. "This is Moegi," he said, pulling the auburn-haired girl into the stall. "This is Udan." Konohamaru continued, repeating the same process with the boy who wore glasses. "Hello?" Moegi said shyly. "Hi." Udan sniffed wetly as he greeted the genin. Naruto smiled widely. "So Konohamaru finally found some friends, huh?" Naruto asked cheerfully, ignoring the boy's indignant glare. "That's great!" "Ano." Moegi smoothed out an imaginary wrinkle in her skirt. "Anyways, take care of him, okay?" Naruto winked at the girl. She blushed. "Right." Moegi agreed. "On," seconded Udan. "Hey!" Konohamaru protested. "I don't need dash." "Who's the pretty oneshin?" Moegi blurted. Haku blinked, taken aback. I almost forgot," Naruto exclaimed, looking apologetically at Haku. "This is Haku." Naruto introduced her. "I met her during my last mission, and now she's my friend." Haku smiled at the children. "It's nice to meet you." Naruto leaned forward. "She doesn't look like it," he whispered confidentially. "But she's a really strong ninja." The kunoichi blushed at Naruto's praise, and the academy students stared at her wide-eyed. "Really?" Konohamaru asked skeptically. "She doesn't look very strong." Moegi glared at him. "Really?" Naruto asserted. "Then let's play ninja!" Naruto and Haku were both confused by Konohamaru's abrupt shift in attitude. "Huh! You've been gone for so long," Konohamaru complained. "You can play ninja with us, right, Naruto Naikin?" He looked helplessly at Haku, who smothered a giggle and nodded. "Fine." Naruto sighed, glancing longingly at the uneaten bowl of ramen sitting on the counter. "Why does a ninja have to play ninja?" "Great!" Konohamaru cheered. He was echoed by Moegi and a far less enthusiastic-sounding Udan. Naruto and Haku ended up playing with Konohamaru and his two new friends for the better part of an hour, during which they fought many fierce battles and eventually triumphed gloriously over the evil Tsuchikage. In the process, Haku became Moegi's lifelong idol as she displayed some of her skills and Naruto narrated a grossly exaggerated, and mostly false, since Haku was within earshot, story about the mission to the wave. 3 impressionable young minds were shocked and awed by Naruto's grand tale of courage, and he gained the title of leader for the first time in his young life. That reminds me, Naruto said as they were walking away from the scene of battle, leaving 3 exhausted ninja wannabes behind. Reminds you of what? Haku asked. I should visit Irika-sensei. Haku perked up. She had heard a great deal about Irika, and she was eager to meet the man that Naruto so admired. Shall we go now? I guess. Naruto shrugged. Classes are out for the day, so he should be free. Naruto paused thoughtfully. Don't you want to continue your tour? Naruto asked. We have plenty of time. Haku murmured. I have plenty of time to learn about the village, but you should see your precious people while you can. Naruto didn't know how to reply to that. Yeah. Haku looked at Konoha's ninja academy with interest. It looked surprisingly peaceful and utilitarian, more like a civilian school than a shinobi one in appearance. It looks nice, Haku said wistfully as they walked onto the grounds. A part of her wished that she could have learned in a place like the academy. Naruto's head lowered. Yeah, he agreed quietly. It was a nice place for most. Naruto didn't have too many good memories of the academy. He had some, but the bad outweighed the good by far. For every happy memory of Irika or Sakura, or even just messing around with Shuji, Shikamaru, and Kiba, there were a dozen more full of mocking laughter, cold eyes, rejection, and bitter failure. Still, this was the place that he had learned to become a ninja, the very first stepping stone on the long road to Hokage. It is a nice place. Naruto-sama? Haku's worried voice snapped him out of his melancholy. Naruto grinned, though there was a touch of nostalgia in it. I used that swing a lot. Naruto pointed to the old, battered wooden swing that hung under the tree dominating the courtyard. Whenever I failed the exam, I would sit on that swing and watch as all of the other kids were led away by their parents. Naruto-sama. The loneliness that he exhibited was palpable, and so very familiar. She did the only thing that came to mind. Haku wordlessly stepped behind her savior and wrapped her arms around him. Naruto stiffened in surprise. What, Ash? It's okay. Haku whispered into his hair. You're not alone anymore. Naruto was silent for a long moment. The tension left his shoulders, and he gently broke her grip and turned to face her. I know, he replied, and smiled a small, genuine smile. Let's go in, he said after a moment, all traces of negative emotion gone. Haku followed Naruto as he marched inside. She was treated to a rushed tour of the building as they headed towards the faculty offices. And this is where I painted the windows orange, Naruto gestured. And that's where I had class in my 3rd year. Oh, and this is where the toilets are. He paused thoughtfully. I blew those up twice, I think. We're here. Naruto came to a stop and knocked on a wooden door. There was a rustling noise inside, and then the door was jerked open. A tall, dark-haired Chunin glared down at them. It's you, the man said in a faintly accusing tone. What do you want? He asked suspiciously. Haku narrowed her eyes, irritated by the man's clear contempt for Naruto. Naruto grinned mischievously. Hey, Tanaka-sensei, he greeted cheerfully, causing the Chunin's left eyebrow to twitch. Is Irika-sensei here? Tanaka stared warily at the grinning boy for several seconds before turning sharply on his heel. Hey, Irika, the brat is looking for you, he called grumpily. Which brat? A muffled voice asked. There's Naruto. Another Chunin had walked into view. Haku studied the brown-haired man with a scar across his nose. He looked average on the whole, but his eyes were warm. Yo, Irika-sensei, Naruto greeted, folding his hands behind his head and grinning widely. I heard you just got back, Irika said, grinning back at the boy as he walked out of the faculty room. Just yesterday. You're looking well, he commented, but Haku could sense the older man's relief. The Chunin looked at her, as if only just noticing her presence. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend, Naruto? This is Haku. Naruto introduced her. Haku, this is Irika-sensei. It's a pleasure to meet you, Haku said politely, bowing her head. Thanks, Irika replied, rubbing his index finger across his nose in an embarrassed gesture. It's nice to meet you too. I was showing her around today, and we stopped by to say hi, Naruto explained. He shifted back and forth on the balls of his feet. Ano-sa, can you take us to Ichiraku's tonight? Your treat. Irika laughed. I see your first real mission hasn't changed you much. He patted Naruto's head fondly. The boy quickly backed away, embarrassed. Haku couldn't help but be happy for Naruto, despite the pain their interaction brought to her own heart. Seeing Naruto talk happily with Irika brought a smile to her lips, especially after all of the cold looks she had witnessed directed toward the boy over the past 2 days. But it also brought up bittersweet memories of her own, of Zabuza patting her own head in a similar fashion. I guess I could take the time off. Iruka continued. Really? Naruto was bouncing with eagerness. Iruka's smile softened. Sure, he said. I'll even help show Haku-san around. Great! Let's get going then. Naruto quickly began herding them towards the nearest exit. Iruka sighed, apparently resigned to Naruto's behavior. Haku laughed quietly. Is he always like this? She asked the older man. To her, Naruto's energetic, childish behavior was new. She knew Naruto as a young ninja who sought to be the greatest in his village. She had seen Naruto with blood on his hands and a haunted gleam in his eyes. Haku knew what he looked like when he killed, and she had seen the monster within him. Seeing the child in him was refreshing, but it was also somewhat jarring. It was like seeing a bloodied wolf become a playful pup. She had only seen glimpses while they had been in the wave, but ever since they had entered Konoha, Naruto's carefree side seemed to have come forward almost permanently. It made her glad to see that he could still remain so innocent, but at the same time she missed the strong, wise beyond his years side that she had grown to know. The Chunin blinked in surprise, still unsure of what to make of her presence. He was happy that Naruto seemed to have made a friend, but… Naruto? He's pretty much always like this, Iruka admitted. Like what? Naruto asked, annoyed by the fact that they were talking as if he wasn't there. Like that, Iruka said, grinning again. Naruto grunted in irritation, but he didn't say anything more until they reached the exit. Ah, that's right. The other two stopped. What is it? Iruka asked. Naruto pointed. I used to have lunch there, right under that tree, in my first year, he confided to Haku. And that's where I first learned to throw shuriken. He gestured wildly towards a set of target posts. Naruto! This is supposed to be tour of Konoha, so stop messing around. What? That's what I'm doing. I don't see you doing anything. You little brat dash. Haku giggled as the two glared at each other fiercely. At some unheard signal they both broke their glares at the same time, as if by mutual consent. Humph! Iruka grunted. Naruto folded his arms, his face screwed up into a stubborn expression. Haku noticed that the corners of their mouths were quirked up slightly. This academy was built nearly 3 decades ago, by the order of the Sandaime Hokage. Iruka adopted a lecturing tone. It was done in order to replace the old academy, which was… Look! Naruto flung his hand out, pointing upward. That's the room where I kicked Sasuke's ass on the day that the teams were assigned. Naruto! The rest of their tour followed a similar pattern as they made their way around the city. Finally, at the end of the day they stopped at Ichiraku Ramen. Welcome! Came the greeting from the father and daughter pair that ran the stand. Haku-san, Iruka-san, Naruto-kun, good evening! I exclaimed. Why am I last? Naruto grumbled quietly. That's a nostalgic sight, Tochi commented. It's been a while since the two of you have been here together. More than 2 months, Iruka agreed. Yeah, and I'm starving. Naruto slid into his seat between Haku and Iruka. First, I want a bowl of pork aken. Iruka surreptitiously checked his wallet and winced. He knew from past experience that by the end of their meal it would be empty. Miso for me, Iruka said. What do you want? Naruto turned his head towards Haku. She tilted her head thoughtfully. I'll have what you're having, she said finally. Another pork, Naruto called. Iruka watched their interaction curiously from the corner of his eye. The girl named Haku was clearly a shinobi, and just as clearly not from Konoha, but beyond that Iruka didn't know much about her. He hadn't had the opportunity to find out much more about her or her relationship with Naruto except for vague details, at least so far. That was unusual in and of itself. Naruto was hardly the type to be secretive or close-mouthed about anything. Iruka was worried. What is her relationship with Naruto? How did they meet? What does she want? Frankly, he was becoming a bit paranoid about the whole matter. So how was your mission? Iruka asked casually, seeking to hide his worries behind conversation. Naruto went still for a brief second, causing Iruka's worries to soar through the roof. Did something happen? He asked quietly. A shiver rippled through Naruto as he stared down at the countertop. It took more effort than usual for him to stretch a smile across his face as he turned to face his very first precious person. It went, he began, only to look down in consternation when a soft, slender hand gently touched his own. Naruto turned to look at Haku quizzically. He met her earnest brown eyes. Slowly, she shook her head, her eyes never leaving his. Iruka watched in amazement as Naruto seemed to sag slightly in his seat at whatever it was the girl was communicating to him. Seeing the two communicate without words did nothing to relieve his growing confusion and worries. It amazed him that they seemed to have an understanding that went beyond words. It implied a closeness that Iruka had only seen a few times in his life. Shinobi who had worked, fought, and risked their lives together for years developed a similar understanding of their teammates. His parents had been like that too. One look from his mother had more meaning to his father than 1,000 words, and the reverse had also held true. It implied a closeness that Iruka could hardly believe was possible for Naruto, and he had formed the bond in such a short period of time, with a foreign shinobi of all people. Naruto? Iruka prompted. He shot a quick glance at Ayame and Teuchi, who were ostensibly busy preparing the food. He was sure, reasonably sure, at least, that they could be trusted. Still, he wasn't sure that the ramen stand was the best place for the conversation this was quickly shaping out to become. Iruka-sensei, Naruto began quietly, apparently having collected himself. The teacher snapped his attention back to the pupil that had reminded him so much of himself. Naruto turned to look at him with a haunted expression. What was it like? Naruto asked. What was what like? Your first kill. Iruka sucked in a startled breath, and he could distantly hear the sound of Ayame gasping in shock. That means… Naruto. Naruto, you… Iruka shook his head, collecting his thoughts. He gave Haku a hard, suspicious look, but there was only gentle sadness in her eyes. If there was anything more, Iruka wasn't skilled enough to divine it. My second Chunin exam, Iruka said in a low voice. It was a ninja from the hidden grass. He continued distantly. He could still hear the strangled, panicked pleading of the other genin as he realized that his life was forfeit. He could still remember the smell and texture of blood as it splashed across his face. I caught him in a trap and killed him with steel wire. Iruka sighed. It was the exam that had led to his promotion from genin to chunin. And you? Iruka asked gently. Naruto looked down at his hands, unable to meet his teacher's eyes. He shot a quick, furtive glance towards Haku. Iruka frowned, his suspicions deepening. Mercenaries, Naruto said finally. A lot of them. With a kunai and my bare hands. His fists clenched convulsively. A nuke-nin, he whispered. Meizu, the name whispered through his mind. Naruto clenched his jaw. Haku's hand once again came up to find his, and she gently pried open his tightly clenched left hand, tracing the angry red marks his nails had dug in his palm. Cool, pale fingers intertwined themselves with his, and she held his hand in a reassuring grip. He relaxed. And one civilian, he murmured. Strangely, it was the last death that bothered him the least. He hated Gato with a fury that scared him, and while on some level he regretted that he had killed the man, most of Naruto felt entirely justified in slaughtering the cruel billionaire. Unsaid, but unforgotten, was that he had nearly caused the death of 2 more by his actions. The sight of Sasuke falling limply to the ground, his breathing seemingly stopped forever, flashed through Naruto's nightmares. He could still see, and feel, Haku's warm red blood as it gushed out onto his hands, and he remembered how the light had faded from her eyes as she had slowly collapsed. Iruka stared at Naruto in abject shock. It was a C-rank mission. How could… The Chunin frowned darkly as he contemplated the events that might have forced Naruto into such a situation. Naruto had left Konoha as an innocent with high aspirations, but he had come back soaked in blood. A disturbing thought occurred to Iruka. I didn't notice, he realized, horrified. Somehow, he had spent nearly half a day in Naruto's company without noticing the telltale signs. Was Naruto's mask that strong, or had he just been too negligent? Iruka took a deep breath. Naruto came first, he could worry later. Naruto! Iruka began, only to stop, at a loss for words. Iruka-sensei, am I a monster? Naruto gripped Haku's hand tightly, waiting to hear the answer. Despite Kakashi's and Haku's reassurances, Iruka's opinion was something he both desperately needed and dreaded to hear. Naruto! Iruka sighed. He gently placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder, causing the boy to flinch before meeting Iruka's gaze. Of course not. Iruka smiled. Relief immediately flooded through Naruto. I know you're not a monster, and you never will be, Iruka said forcefully, causing Naruto to smile weakly. Iruka's faith in him was humbling. The older man had no doubts about Naruto's true character, and the boy was more grateful than words could convey for that fact. A bowl of steaming ramen was set before Naruto. It was piled high with extra toppings, and it smelled incredibly good to the hungry and emotionally exhausted boy. He looked up questioningly. This is… Ayame smiled gently. You just came back from your first big mission, right? Eat up. Tochi grunted in agreement. A smile slowly spread across Naruto's face. Right, he agreed, picking up a pair of chopsticks. Itadakimasu! Dinner flew by quickly, and the mood grew lighter with every bowl of ramen Naruto gobbled up, which was quite a few. Iruka could practically feel his wallet growing thinner with each bowl, but he couldn't bring himself begrudge Naruto his ramen, especially after Naruto's confession. When they were done, Naruto burped happily. Thanks, Iruka-sensei, he said sincerely, and Iruka could tell that Naruto was thanking him for more than ramen. You're welcome, Iruka replied. Come on, I'll walk you home. Eh? I don't need. I still haven't heard the whole story about your mission. Iruka cut him off. Oh, Naruto blinked. Okay. The walk back to Naruto's apartment was filled with small talk as Iruka and Naruto traded stories about trivial events that had occurred in the 2 months Naruto had been gone. Naruto was still laughing from Iruka's complaints that he preferred Konohamaru's old temper tantrums to the amateurish pranks that he had begun pulling recently when they finally reached Naruto's apartment. Iruka turned to Haku as they stepped into the kitchen area. Shouldn't you be getting home? He asked. He was still wary of the girl, and he wanted to hear the story from Naruto without her interference. Haku blinked innocently. I am home, she replied. You are home. Iruka looked around Naruto's apartment in confusion. But this is... Iruka trailed off, realization dawning on his face as he put the pieces together. You're living together, he bellowed. Naruto winced. Why yes? Naruto replied hesitantly. Iruka took a deep breath. He counted backwards from 10. He took another deep breath. Why? He asked finally. Iruka glared at them both and folded his arms expectantly. Well, Naruto began. A long, convoluted explanation tumbled out of the genin. Iruka remained ominously silent as Naruto narrated the series of events, with a few helpful interjections by Haku, which had led Haku to Naruto's house. I see, the Chunin instructor said when Naruto finished. He stood abruptly from the chair he had commandeered. I'll be back to check on you, Iruka said tersely. He stopped. Naruto. Yes? The boy asked nervously. Iruka turned and smiled. I'm glad you're back. He turned again and began walking towards the exit. Iruka-sensei. Naruto relaxed, relieved. Let's go for ramen again soon, he called. Yeah, Iruka agreed before closing the door. There was silence in the apartment. He was nice, Haku finally commented. Yeah, he's great, isn't he? Naruto grinned happily. It looked like Haku and Iruka had both accepted each other, somewhat, anyways. Iruka stalked off towards his own apartment, muttering inaudibly under his breath. Tomorrow, he was going to go to the administration building and have a long discussion with the Hokage, the senile old bat. Then he was going to hunt down the irresponsible jackass that called himself Hatake Kakashi and have a very unpleasant conversation with the man, which could very possibly end in violence. Iruka smiled grimly, pondering skipping the conversation altogether and going straight to violence. Uchiha Sasuke glared. Haku continued to smile blithely as she watched Naruto spar with Sakura. Well, it was more like Sakura was chasing Naruto around the training grounds as Naruto did his best to stay away from her without resorting to ninjutsu. Haku sitting in on Team 7's training sessions was new and Sasuke did not like it at all. Why is she here? Sasuke grumbled bitterly to himself. But he knew the answer to that, and its name was Naruto. Haku followed Naruto around like a starving puppy that had been given scraps. Now that she had come to Konoha, she had been given a legitimate reason for doing so. The girl was to have a constant escort, and Naruto had been a shoo-in for the job. Since Naruto was a ninja in Genin Cell 7, that meant that Sasuke saw far more of Haku than he wanted to, which was not at all. His rage had lessened over time, but that didn't mean he found the older girl in the least bit tolerable. Seeing her smug smile gave him violent thoughts, but he was able to control himself enough not to act on them, so far. Sasuke had experienced 3 humiliating defeats in his life. Uchiha Itachi had handled Sasuke like a kitten that night 4 years ago, Hatake Kakashi had left him buried with only his head left above the ground, and Haku had neatly cut him off from consciousness with her barrage of Saban. Of all of those, Haku was the closest to his level and his age, which just made it sting more. Nothing could ever top Itachi's beating, but Sasuke's defeat at the hands of the kunoichi was humiliating nonetheless. Unlike the other two, Sasuke was not so far behind Haku in terms of skill, which meant that he shouldn't have been handled so casually. She was also a kunoichi, making his defeat even more infuriating. Sasuke's experience with kunoichi was admittedly limited, but he had seen few examples of competence from them. Of course, a large measure of his experience was based on the behavior of the aspiring kunoichi at the academy. Logically, Sasuke knew that there were competent female shinobi out there. He had just never seen one. In the end, it boiled down to the fact that Sasuke hated losing, and he hated losing to a girl even more. But the worst offense that Haku had committed against Sasuke was losing against Naruto. Somehow the dead last had managed to overcome an opponent Sasuke himself could not. It ticked him off. How had Naruto managed to beat her in the first place? The details Sasuke had managed to work out seemed sketchy at best, which led him to the conclusion that she must have done it on purpose. He had no idea why she would do such a thing, but it made sense to Sasuke. Naruto could not possibly have done it by himself. Therefore, Haku must have facilitated it. That conclusion gave Sasuke mixed feelings. A part of him grew even angrier with Haku over her seemingly duplicitous behavior. But mostly he felt relieved. Naruto had not surpassed him, and his victory over Haku was indeed a fluke. Much of the tension that he had been feeling for the past 2 months drained out of Sasuke. Haku may have been a kunoichi, but she was also a genius with a bloodline limit, and that served to lessen the sting of defeat. Sasuke hated to lose, but losing to another genius was far more palatable than losing, even indirectly, to the dead last, all-time idiot named Uzumaki Naruto. To think, I almost challenged the dope to a fight. The thought that Naruto might be a worthy opponent now seemed laughable in hindsight. Enough! Kakashi barked, bringing Sakura and Naruto to a stop. Sasuke began walking towards his teacher, and the other two did the same. When they were all gathered, Kakashi looked over them with a critical eye. Naruto! Kakashi began casually. Huh! When I told you to spar with Sakura, I didn't mean run away from her. How are you going to improve your taijutsu if you don't work with your partner? Kakashi demanded. But what? Naruto looked to the ground, blushing. She's Sakura-chan, he whispered. Naruto shivered. It was true that he was reluctant to fight Sakura because she was Sakura-chan. But it was also true that Sakura's rage was something he feared more than almost anything else. Naruto! Kakashi began, his tone scolding. It's an insult to your sparring partner if you don't take them seriously. Naruto looked up, wide-eyed. Not only are you setting back your own training, you are refusing to help Sakura improve by goofing off like that. Naruto lowered his head, shamefaced. Besides, Kakashi's tone became cheerful again. If you want more evasion training, I'm more than happy to help. Naruto blanched, and another shiver crawled its way up his spine. Kakashi turned to his other student. Sakura. The pink-haired, pink-faced girl panted for a moment, catching her breath. Yes? You spent the whole time chasing after Naruto, rather than thinking up a plan to corner him. Considering that you are supposed to be one of the most intelligent shinobi of your generation, I can only conclude that you let your annoyance with Naruto cloud your judgment. Sakura winced. It was true. Naruto had been getting on her nerves all day with his clumsy flirting, and Haku standing behind him, studying her with all too knowing eyes, had only deepened Sakura's bad mood. When Naruto had gotten into a spat with Sasuke, her temper had reached the end of its fuse. Sakura had been wholly focused on catching Naruto and wringing his neck during their sparring session. It had not occurred to her to devise a plan. Kakashi sighed, exasperated. If you let your emotions cloud your judgment in the field, you'll get killed, Kakashi said bluntly, causing them both to flinch. Not only that, you'll get your teammates killed too. He paused and looked them both in the eyes in turn. Remember that, he cautioned. Now, Sakura, your taijutsu form is textbook perfect, he praised, causing the girl to preen slightly in pride. But your speed, strength, and stamina are all abysmal. And you should remember that you aren't the only one who read the textbooks. Sakura drooped. It was something she had heard before, but having it pointed out so bluntly, in front of her crush no less, was bruising to her ego. She fervently hoped that Haku had not heard the comment, but looking at the smiling girl dispelled those hopes. I bet she's laughing at me, Sakura thought bitterly. Sakura's self-doubt skyrocketed whenever the older girl was around. To Sakura, Haku's presence was like a magnifying glass under which her own faults became all too clear. Kakashi seemed oblivious to Sakura's growing depression as his uncovered eye stared expectantly at her. I understand, Sakura muttered glumly. Naruto. Kakashi addressed the boy, who looked ready to spring to Sakura's defense. You're pretty much the opposite of Sakura. Your taijutsu form is awful, and frankly you suck at it. Naruto turned red and he glared at his teacher. Unlike Sakura, Naruto was not the type to take criticism lying down. But you're faster and stronger than Sakura, which is why you had no trouble keeping your distance and fending her off, and your stamina is even greater than mine. It was Naruto's turn to puff up in pride. But Sasuke is much faster and better at taijutsu than you, so don't let it go to your head. Kakashi quickly punctured a hole in Naruto's pride. Naruto turned to glare at Sasuke, who gave self-satisfied smirk in reply. What about Sasuke? Naruto asked, pointing angrily at the other boy. Well, out of all of you his taijutsu is the most balanced, so he doesn't have as much work to do. His skills are higher than either of you, and he's faster as well. His stamina is less than yours, but he has better control than you do, so it evens out. Really, about the only thing that you're his equal at is physical strength. Naruto's fists were tightly clenched, and his eyes burned with humiliation and anger. Normally Kakashi wouldn't have made such a blunt comparison between his genin, especially in front of the others, but he felt that Naruto and Sakura both needed to increase their training and smooth out some of their more blatant faults. He was thinking of entering them into the upcoming Chunin exam, and Naruto and Sakura needed more work. He felt that they would probably do well enough for the first two tests as they were now, since those were largely tests of teamwork and determination. But the third round was always a tournament-style competition where individual skills were more important than teamwork or willpower, and Naruto and Sakura would be hard-pressed to match the other genin that made it that far. If dragging their flaws out into the open would make them work harder to correct them, Kakashi was all for it. Besides, Naruto deserved it for putting that damn Chunin on his case. It had taken 3 days to get his apartment door replaced. Are we done for today, sensei? Sakura asked. Kakashi nodded. We'll stop here for now. Tomorrow we'll start taking D-ranked missions again, so be ready. Later. He waved. White smoke exploded around Kakashi, and when it cleared, the Jounin was gone. Sasuke shoved his hands in his pockets and began walking towards the village. Sakura hesitated, staring at Sasuke's retreating back, but her feet remained rooted to the ground as the prodigy drew further and further away. Naruto, who had snapped out of his own angry thoughts, stared at his crush in amazement. What's wrong with Sakura-chan? Naruto wondered, too worried to be ecstatic about her behavior. Normally he would have taken her not chasing after Sasuke as a good sign, but his new habit of trying to, as Kakashi phrased it, look underneath the underneath, told him that Sakura was not her normal self. Sakura-chan. Naruto hated how hesitant and small his voice sounded as he addressed the pink-haired girl. He was still uncertain of how to behave around her, and it made him timid in his dealings with her. Naruto had been able to successfully conceal it with his usual bravado, but on the inside he was afraid of the new directions his relationship with Sakura might take. Sakura still wasn't completely over her uncertainty regarding him, and Naruto knew it. One wrong word, one misperceived action, and what little relationship they had could flounder forever. Naruto? She asked, blinking in surprise. For a moment, Sakura had forgotten the other boy was there. It was rare that he was so silent. You're not going to go after Sasuke? Naruto winced at his tactlessness. The moment the words had left his mouth he knew that he was in for a punch to the face. Sakura glared at him, confirming his suspicions. Naruto shut his eyes. After several moments, he opened them in surprise. Sakura had not punched him like she normally would for questioning her devotion to Sasuke. Instead, she was staring at him with a vaguely horrified look. Naruto scratched his head, bewildered. Sakura had felt a flash of righteous anger when Naruto had questioned her behavior, but it had quickly dissolved into horror when Naruto's eyes had shut in terror. Realization swept her anger away and she felt sickened. Naruto was afraid of her retaliation for asking a simple question. He had fully expected her to hit him, and she almost had. Worse was that it was more than just annoyance. She had almost hit him out of reflex. I've hit Naruto so many times it's become a reflex? It was a disturbing thought. Was she really so temperamental and abusive? Naruto's clear puzzlement at the punch that did not come only served as an unwelcome confirmation. When had she become such a cruel girl? Had she seen her own behavior in another girl, she would have been disgusted, but somehow it had worked its way into her mind that hitting Naruto every time he annoyed her was perfectly acceptable behavior. It was perfectly acceptable behavior, Sakura realized even as her disgust mounted. Nobody liked Naruto. Everyone shunned him, looked down on him, and acted in ways that suddenly seemed very cruel to Sakura. No one cared if she hit Naruto besides Naruto himself. Sakura knew that she would have been reprimanded for casually belting any other Konoha citizen. But in the end, no matter what anyone else thought of her actions, it came down to her. She was the one who physically and verbally lashed out at Naruto on an almost daily basis. Her actions were the most despicable, because she was the object of his affections and she knew it. If Sasuke-kun behaved like that towards me... An awful, cold feeling clawed its way up her esophagus. Just thinking about it sent shivers up her spine and caused a cold lump to form in her throat. She would be devastated every time he insulted her or lashed out at her, but she would never abandon Sasuke-kun. It would become a vicious, never-ending cycle, just like her relationship with Naruto had become. Naruto! Sakura was at a loss for words. What should I say at a time like this? How can I apologize? Huh! Naruto was still standing awkwardly nearby, looking more confused than ever. Sakura hesitated. What is it, Sakura-chan? Naruto smiled at her, making Sakura feel even worse. How can he still smile at me? That is… Sakura abruptly realized that they were not alone. Haku still had not moved from her perch beneath a tree near the stream. The other kunoichi was watching her intently. That is… Naruto stared at her expectantly. Training! Sakura blurted. What? Sakura asked herself. What? Naruto echoed her inner thoughts. I don't know. Sakura thought desperately. What about training? Suddenly she remembered Kakashi's criticism. Will you train with me? Sakura asked, feeling more confident. Naruto gaped in abject amazement, and Sakura blushed. She trailed off. I just want to apologize, Sakura thought, but the words would not come out. She was all too aware of Haku sitting not far off, studying her every action. Even if they had been in total privacy, Sakura would probably not have been able to work up the courage to apologize to Naruto for her behavior. With Haku watching, it was impossible. You're stronger, faster, and have more stamina than I do, Sakura hastily explained. I have better form and chakra control, so we can both learn from each other. She had made up her explanation on the spot, but it worked. Comprehension dawned on Naruto's face and he beamed at her. Sakura feared she would be blinded by the force of his grin. Right! Naruto exclaimed happily. Sakura smiled weakly in reply. She had to forcibly will herself not to glance towards Haku, but she could feel the older girl's heavy gaze on her as she began to work out the details of their new training arrangement with a bubbly Naruto. Haku waited patiently for Naruto and Sakura to finish their sparring session. She didn't know what the other girl's motive for proposing joint training sessions with Naruto was, but it had actually started to work out for the best. The two genin had been training with each other in the afternoon, after Team 7's official training ended, for more than a week. At first, things had been awkward and unproductive, but gradually they had started to relax and actually help train each other. Sakura was quick with tips of chakra control and molding, and she could always spot the flaws in Naruto's bastardized version of the Academy's standard taijutsu style. Naruto gradually came to terms with the fact that he was training with Sakura, without the rest of Team 7 around, and his naturally driven spirit came out. He worked feverishly to correct the flaws that Sakura pointed out. He began to fight her seriously in their spars, forcing the girl to improve her own taijutsu as well as cope with his occasional bursts of innovation. Her stamina started to gradually rise as a result. On Haku's part, the training sessions just meant further opportunities for her to analyze Naruto's strengths and weaknesses. She had been doing so even before they had fought each other, but her observation had truly begun in earnest the moment she decided that she would lend her strength to help Naruto achieve his dreams. To become Hokage, Naruto would need help, and she planned to give as much help as she possibly could. It was for this reason that she had thoroughly observed Naruto's abilities and fighting style. After watching Team 7's missions around the village, their training sessions, and Naruto's own individual practice, Haku finally felt like she had gathered enough information to start helping him. A sharp, metallic clanging noise caught Haku's attention. Naruto and Sakura were locked together in a battle of strength, with their kunai struggling against each other. Sakura was losing, but rather than allow herself to be overpowered by Naruto, she lashed out at his knee with her foot. It was risky, since it dangerously undermined her power and stability, but Naruto was not fast enough to capitalize on the opening. He was fast enough to evade it though. He sprang backwards, narrowly escaping the range of Sakura's kick. A kunai pursued him, but Naruto was able to bat it aside with his own blade as soon as it entered his reach. Naruto and Sakura stared at each other. Naruto was sweating and his clothes were dirty and scuffed, but other than that there was little sign that he had been training for nearly 2 hours. Sakura was panting harshly. She was clearly far more exhausted than Naruto, but Haku noted that her legs were steady beneath her. On the first day, Sakura had barely been able to stand by the end of training. She's improving already, Haku thought approvingly. Haku smiled proudly. Knowingly or not, Naruto had set Sakura on the path towards becoming stronger, and he helped her with it every day. Naruto had set a fire in Sakura, a drive to train and become better than she was. It was something Naruto could be proud of, and Haku felt proud of him for it. His accomplishments were hers, and the opposite also held true. Naruto didn't understand yet, but one day he would. She would show him. Haku watched Naruto and Sakura begin to wind down. The training sessions between the two was changing their relationship. What had been forced comradeship on Sakura's part and puppy love on Naruto's was slowly beginning to transform into genuine friendship. Haku had never seen the two talking as casually as they were now. Haku frowned when Sakura giggled at something Naruto had said. Naruto liked Sakura. This much Haku had gleaned very early on. But as Sakura began to warm up to Naruto, the possibility that she might come to like the blonde grew. Sakura was obsessed with the Uchiha boy, and that made the chances of her returning Naruto's affection slim, but they were there nonetheless. Haku's frown deepened. She was Naruto-sama's loyal follower. It was her goal to make his dreams a reality. So why does it feel so uncomfortable? When she thought of Naruto and Sakura getting closer, it brought an uncomfortably lump to her throat. It wasn't quite jealousy, since she had no romantic aspirations towards Naruto, no more than a dog had towards its master or a tool towards its wielder. It was more like fear, or loneliness. But why was that? Haku knew that Naruto would keep his promise to her. She knew that he would never abandon her, no matter what happened. So why did she feel an almost instinctive dislike towards Team 7's Kunoichi for getting closer to him? It was not a question she was able to answer by the time Sakura had left the training grounds. The afternoon sun cast molten rays over the forest and the trees through deep shadows. A battered but energetic Naruto eagerly led the way back into the village for dinner. She scanned the cupboards intently, as if careful investigation would turn up edible foodstuffs other than ramen. There were no vegetables to speak of, the bread was moldy, and every dairy product Naruto possessed was far past freshness and heading into overly ripe. Haku had known that their food situation was bad, but she hadn't realized just how bad it was. Naruto had taken her out to eat every day so far, perhaps because he was so excited about his mission pay. But eating out constantly was an expensive hobby, made even more so due to the fact that he was feeding two people rather than one, and Haku bore witness to a new aspect of Naruto that she had never seen before. Naruto's financially conservative side had taken over, which was why Haku was fruitlessly hunting for something to cook other than cup ramen. Naruto cheerfully stomped out of the bathroom and into the kitchen. "Let's eat!" he exclaimed boisterously, his blonde hair still glistening and damp from his shower. "What?" he asked a moment later, defensively. Haku was staring at him expectantly, her hands over her hips. He met her stare with a bewildered look. "Is she mad?" Haku sighed. "Please get dressed, Naruto-sama," she requested, as unfailingly polite as always. Naruto blinked and looked down at himself. "I am dressed," he replied, pulling on his baggy white shirt and loose pajama pants. Haku shook her head. "We're going out to get groceries," Haku told him. "So please get dressed." "Groceries?" Naruto was confused. "Why?" Still, Naruto knew from his experiences with Sakura that when a girl used that tone it was far less painful to just do as he was ordered, even if it prickled at his pride. Haku probably wouldn't hit him like Sakura-chan would, but he didn't want to disappoint the former Nuke-nin. He tramped back into the bathroom to retrieve his normal clothes. "Though now that I think about it, Sakura-chan hasn't been hitting me as much lately. I wonder why." It was puzzling, but Naruto felt that it was a case where it would be best not to look a gift horse in the mouth, in case it bit off his head and trampled his corpse. He led Haku to the nearest grocery store that was still open. The grocer was a middle-aged woman that Naruto didn't recognize. He didn't normally frequent this store, and when Naruto and Haku entered she looked up to give her customary greeting. "Welcome." The woman's face and words froze as she caught sight of her customers. Haku either didn't notice or didn't care as she strode purposefully into the store, her eyes sweeping the various shelves. Naruto, in a curious reversal of their usual roles, trailed after Haku quietly. He was sure that any moment the shopkeeper would get up and refuse to offer him service, but surprisingly she stayed silent as Haku glided through the store and filled her basket. Naruto winced at the profusion of vegetables that Haku was procuring, but she was also grabbing all sorts of other foodstuffs. Her basket was soon overflowing, and Naruto was forced to grab another. They filled 3 baskets worth of food up and placed them at the counter. Naruto stared with silent dread at the baskets. Already he could hear Gamachan crying out in agony. The shopkeeper stared at Naruto silently, and made no moves to ring up their purchases. "We're done." Haku smiled politely at the grocer. She frowned when the woman only looked at her. "Will you tell us how much everything costs?" "We're closed," the woman said finally. Naruto scowled. So that's why. The reason she hadn't tried to kick him out in the beginning was so that they would have to waste time finding what they wanted before she refused service. "What?" Haku stole a quick glance at the window. "That says that you will still be open for another 2 hours," Haku pointed out mildly. We closed early today. Haku's normally warm brown eyes grew cold. Your doors were unlocked. The woman scowled, her puffy cheeks growing red with anger. She pointed to a sign behind her. I refuse service, she declared. Haku was incredulous. Why? She demanded. The grocer glared. You've been rude, she huffed, but her quick, venomous glance towards Naruto revealed her true motivation. Abruptly, the temperature in the store seemed to drop by 20 degrees. Goosebumps broke out on Naruto's arms, and he resisted the urge to rub warmth back into them. I see. Haku's voice was no longer heated. Instead, her tone had become glacial. Her eyes bore into the grocer's, and the older woman flinched back fearfully. What you are doing is wrong, Haku told her quietly. If you wrong other people, it will surely come back to you one day. Naruto suddenly realized that Haku was directing a highly focused spike of killing intent towards the shopkeeper. I have a bad feeling about this. Haku! The killing intent vanished as suddenly as it appeared. The girl turned towards Naruto questioningly. Yes, Naruto-sama? Don't threaten her, he said sharply, gesturing towards the cowering grocer. He sighed, suddenly weary. It's not worth it, he said quietly. Haku stared at him, her eyes wide in surprise. I understand. She bowed her head. She took a calming breath before turning her gaze back to the old woman. Do you see? Haku asked the shopkeeper quietly. You refused him service because of an ignorant prejudice. The grocer's eyes widened in fear and indignation. But he protected you. Haku tilted her head slightly. If he had not, who knows what could have happened? A small mirror cracked loudly, its polished surface cloudy with frost. Naruto frowned and the woman stared in horror at the mirror. In the end, they got their groceries. The grocer had nearly fallen over herself trying to ring up their purchases as quickly as possible. Haku had smiled a strange, self-satisfied smile watching the terrified shopkeeper. Naruto and Haku had left, burdened by several plastic bags full of food. Naruto was subdued as they walked back to his apartment. They had gotten the groceries, at normal prices, no less, and no one had been hurt. Haku had threatened a Konoha citizen for his sake. No one, apart from perhaps the Sandaime, had ever called anyone to task for their prejudice against him. Yet Haku had stood up for him. He was happy for that. But he didn't want his happiness to come at the expense of others. Naruto didn't want to give people even more cause to hate him, and threatening civilians would not help. Besides, even though it was nice that someone had stuck up for him, Naruto preferred to fight his own battles. Please don't do that again, Naruto quietly told Haku as they approached his apartment building. Eh? Haku frowned at the anxious look in his eyes. She stopped and turned to face the genin fully. I will not let anyone treat you that way, Haku said firmly. Naruto's eyes widened. Naruto-sama, you saved me from the darkness within me. I cannot stand by and let people abuse you without consequence. She took a deep breath before continuing. But I will try not to resort to threats. Naruto stared at her in wonder, speechless. His mouth worked for several moments, but no sound came out. His eyes were bright. Thanks, Naruto whispered finally. That's all I can ask for. Haku smiled. Let's go home, she murmured. She reveled in that statement for a moment. I'll make a delicious dinner for you, she said cheerfully, trying to lighten the mood. Naruto grinned. Really? He asked eagerly. She really did, at least if the way Naruto patted his bulging stomach and sighed in contentment was anything to go by. He hadn't liked the amount of green that had sprouted on his plate, but Haku made a delicious tonkatsu even with all of the cabbage and other leafy things. Was it good? Haku asked, her hands supporting her head as she gazed at him from across the table. It was great! Naruto exclaimed enthusiastically. He had never eaten home cooking besides his own before. It was definitely something he could get used to, especially if the cook was as skilled as Haku seemed to be. Haku beamed. She had been afraid that her skills would be rusty, but apparently they were still sharp. She had learned cooking from a family-owned restaurant in Lightning Country as a part of her training with Zabuza-san. It was standard for kunoichi to be trained in what were traditionally considered women's skills as a part of their infiltration training, but it had been rare for her to actually use those skills. Suddenly she had good reason to practice those skills, and she was surprisingly happy about it. Haku stood and began to clear off the table. Naruto quickly joined her, waving off her protests as he did so. Between the two of them they quickly cleaned Naruto's small kitchen and the dishes left over from dinner. When they were done, Haku glanced at the wall-mounted clock. It's late, she realized unhappily. She had hoped to get started earlier, but it would have to do. Naruto-sama, can we go back to the training grounds? Why? He asked curiously. Haku smiled enigmatically. There's something I would like to show you. Team 7's training ground was bathed in the silvery light of the waning moon. Naruto and Haku stood next to the stream in silence for several moments. What did you want to show me? Naruto asked. As far as he could see, there was nothing out of the ordinary that warranted a late-night trip. I wanted. Haku paused uncertainly, unsure of how to explain. She took a deep breath and let it go with a sigh. Naruto-sama, your dream is to become Hokage, right? Yeah. Naruto agreed. What does that have to do with it? What is a Hokage? Naruto stared at her for a moment. The strongest ninja in Konoha, he said enthusiastically. His smile faded and he looked back towards the village and the monument. He bit his lip, thinking about the battle with the demon brothers. A Hokage is a sacrifice, he murmured. He leads the village and protects it. When the village is threatened, the Hokage will give his life to defend it. Naruto's hand drifted over his stomach. He accepts all of Konoha's burdens and takes responsibility for everything. Naruto stared at the moon, feeling oddly melancholy. For a long time, all the title of Hokage had meant to him was strength and respect. It still meant that, but he now knew that the Hokage was so much more. The luster of his dream had been dulled and Naruto now saw that the road to Hokage was drenched in blood. But that only made him more determined than ever. The Yondaime had turned Naruto into a living sacrifice for Konoha's sake. Naruto had mixed feelings about that, but he felt that it was only fitting that he should carry the title of Hokage and bear the burdens that brought. After all, he already was Konoha's sacrifice. Haku was surprised by Naruto's answer. She knew from her own experiences and Zabuza-san's words that the Mizukage would have laughed at the idea of a selfless Kage. And Zabuza-san. Haku frowned uncomfortably at the thought. She knew that he would have disagreed as well. To him, and until recently, to her, a ninja was nothing more than a tool, and even the villages themselves were nothing more than tools for the daimyo. A tool should die for its wielder, not the other way around. Before she had met Naruto, this was what she had believed. What she still believed, really. Life had beaten such naive views and pretty words out of her a long time ago. For a long time all she had left of them were dreams and the idea of a precious person. Yet now, as she basked in Naruto's light, in the strength of his spirit, she wanted with all of her being for him to be right. To protect one that is precious, that is true strength. Haku had clung to that one idealistic belief, even when blood had threatened to drown her soul. Konoha was known among the other shinobi villages as soft, yet Haku was starting to see that they grasped what truly made a ninja strong better than any other village. Perhaps it was because Konoha's Hokage were like Naruto had described. Yes, she agreed softly. To be Hokage, you must be truly strong in all respects. She paused, confirming that she had Naruto's attention. This includes all of the ninja arts. I know. Naruto nodded. Right now, what do you think your biggest weaknesses are? Naruto looked down. He remembered all too well the humiliation that Kakashi had put him through last week. Taijutsu, he said softly. He clenched his fist tightly. Genjutsu, Naruto continued. Chakra control and speed. He sighed unhappily. I've trained so hard. Why is that list so long? Why am I still so far behind Sasuke? I don't think things through enough, Naruto said quietly. And I don't know a lot of basic stuff I should have learned in the academy. I can't control my emotions very well and my accuracy with Kunai and Shuriken is the lowest in Team 7. Naruto's eyes stared dully at the dark mass of grass and dirt beneath his feet. The only thing I'm good for is my stamina, he finished darkly. He had thought long and hard about his own weaknesses ever since the battle on the bridge. It had taken him a lot of time to overcome his reluctance to face his own faults, but he had always known that they were plentiful. Even so, he hated his own weakness. Naruto felt humiliated every time Sasuke's superiority was ground into his face, which was often. No matter how hard he worked, he could never seem to close the gap between them. Naruto knew logically that it was not a huge gap, but after years of watching Sasuke's back it seemed like a wide bottomless chasm separated them. Naruto-sama, Haku murmured, placing her hands on his shoulders. Naruto looked up to meet Haku's warm gaze. Even if you have many deficiencies in your skills, Naruto winced. You are not weak. Haku smiled wryly. I know that better than anyone else. Her smile grew. You are the strongest person I have ever met, she said firmly. Naruto's eyes widened. But dash! Not all strength is measured in physical skills, she interrupted. Your life has been as harsh as mine in its own way, yet you still have the strength to smile. You wish to become Hokage and protect your village, despite their hate. Even though you fail often, you always get back up. Haku dropped her hands from his shoulders and reached down to take his hand. I believe that you are truly a strong person. Naruto trailed off, his voice hoarse. Thank you, he whispered, for the second time that day. You are welcome, she replied, smiling happily. With that said, I believe that you can become as strong in the ninja arts as you are as a person. I will help you do so. Naruto looked up, a hopeful expression on his face. Really? He asked. Yes, she affirmed. I am not a great shinobi or a great teacher, but I will help you as much as I am able to. Several months ago, Naruto would have exploded with joy at the notion of training with a dedicated teacher and honing his skills. Instead, his joy was constrained to an earnest smile. Thank you, he said yet again. Haku began to walk towards the stream. Naruto followed, curious and eager to begin training. She stopped and knelt at the edge of the creek. How do you cut water? Haku asked abruptly. Huh! Naruto scratched the back of his head. With a blade? He guessed. Haku shook her head. You cannot. Not truly, anyway. Then why'd you ask? Naruto wondered. Watch, Haku said. Her hand slashed through the surface of the water in a swift motion. Water sprayed away from the point of contact. Do you see? She asked. Even though my hand cut through the water, it had no lasting effect. Immediately after my hand passed, the cut disappeared. The nature of water is fluid. Even should you apply incredible force to water, it will only retreat and reform. So how do you cut water so that it leaves a lasting impression? Naruto was even more bewildered than before. You just said that you can't, he pointed out. Wordlessly, Haku rose to her feet and abruptly stomped a foot down on the surface of the stream. Water shot into the air in response and Haku exploded into motion. Her hands blurred in motions too fast for Naruto to track, and the airborne water seemed to explode in all directions away from Haku. Naruto gaped in amazement. His eyes widened even further when he found a glistening samban precariously close to his face. A single droplet of water clung on the tip of the large needle. To cut water means to separate water, she said softly. A large body of water will always reform, so you have to make it smaller. Break it down into smaller pieces and it becomes easier and easier to separate large bodies of water into smaller bodies of water. She paused and gestured to the small puddles that had gathered as a result of her demonstration. But, she continued, to cut water, one must be fast. The droplet fell, and Haku's arm blurred again. 2 noticeably smaller droplets of water hit the ground. Naruto gulped. His eyes couldn't keep up with her speed. She had been even faster before, when she had used those strange ice mirrors. It occurred to him that the battle on the bridge would have gone very differently had the Kyuubi's chakra not come out. Awesome! Naruto grinned in excitement. Haku's lips twitched in amusement. Speed is the essence of the Susutsuken, she continued. Susutsuken? Yes. The water-cutting fist is one of the oldest taijutsu styles in the country of water, and it was one of the original styles practiced by the first Mist Ninja. It has mostly faded out of use in Kirigakure, but there are few nin that still practice it. Haku paused for a moment. Zabuza-san used it, before he began to use swords in combat, she said, her manner subdued. Haku, Naruto murmured uncomfortably. Zabuza was an extremely touchy subject, and he still didn't have a clue about how to deal with it when it came up. It's alright, Naruto-sama. She smiled sadly. As I was saying, the Susutsuken is an offensive style based around speed and precision. Naruto winced. Speed and precision were 2 of his bigger weaknesses. A question occurred to him. Precision? Naruto asked. Haku nodded and knelt by the burbling stream again. When I tried to part the water earlier, you saw that it immediately reformed, right? Yeah. Haku stiffened her hand and slashed the water again. Her arm had already completed its motion ahead of the spray kicked up from her slash. For a brief second, it seemed like the water was motionless, the canyon carved by her hand standing out starkly in the moonlight. The second ended and the water's surface was once again whole. Faster, she said softly. Her hand blurred into motion again. Faster. Another slash sliced the water's surface. Faster. Again and again her hand cut the water, moving faster each time. Do you see? She asked finally, her arm a blur of motion. Water will reform, if you give it time to reform. You must cut, and you must cut fast. You cannot stop cutting, but you must attack the same exact spot if you want the water to remain parted. To do otherwise will disrupt the effect. Thus, precision. She stopped and looked at Naruto seriously. Susutsuken uses speed to breach an opponent's guard to attack vital and vulnerable points. Since the truly vital points will be well guarded by the opponent, Attacking nerve endings and certain sensitive points first helps to break an opponent's guard, opening the way to attack vital organs or attack and destroy the enemy's ability to move and thus fight. Ha! Naruto sighed. It certainly didn't sound like it suited him. Naruto-sama, I believe that the Susutsuken is suitable for you, Haku asserted, sensing Naruto's doubt. I'm slow and sloppy and not precise at all, Naruto retorted glumly. How can it be suited to me? It is precisely because you are those things that it is suited to you, Haku countered. Naruto gave her a disbelieving look. A ninja should be balanced, and the Hokage must be skillful in all fields of ninja ability. To become stronger than you are now, you must turn your weakness into strength. Do you understand? Turn my weakness into strength? Yes. If you are slow, train and become fast. If you lack skill, you should train and gain skill. If you are not precise, then practice until you gain precision. A shinobi must be adaptable, but adaptability is not always a natural ability. A ninja gains adaptability through training and experience. You must train your weaknesses as well as your strengths, since you cannot always rely only on what comes naturally to you to survive a battle. You understand that, right, Naruto-sama? I understand. He did, even if he had never put it into words. He would never have put so many fruitless hours into practicing the Bunshin no Jutsu if he hadn't understood. Let's get started, Naruto said excitedly as the prospect of learning new techniques fully took hold. Once I learn this, I'll be able to kick Sasuke's ass. A happy vision of a bruised Sasuke kneeling at his feet, while Sakura clung to his side, filtered through Naruto's mind. Haku was happy to see that he was so enthusiastic, but she had a feeling that he was getting the wrong idea. Naruto-sama, this will take a long time to learn, she cautioned. Naruto made an unhappy noise. It will take a significant amount of time to train your speed to the point where you will be able to use the Susutsuken to its full potential. Learning the intricacies of the style itself and honing your skills will take just as long, if not longer, Haku explained. She hesitated before continuing. Your progress may be further slowed by the lack of a skilled teacher. What do you mean? Naruto demanded. You know it, right? Then you can teach me. I know the Susutsuken, Haku acknowledged. However, I am not very skilled. Taijutsu is not only your weak point, it is mine as well. An awkward silence developed, and Haku felt a sense of failure envelope her as she looked at Naruto's disappointed face. I can teach you the basics. Haku broke the silence. And I can help you hone your speed. But beyond that, you will have to continue on your own or find a more skilled teacher. Her main focus had always been on honing her speed in close combat, a focus that both the Susutsuken and Zabuza himself had encouraged. Her speed made her formidable. She could match many jounin in speed, but if she was caught by a faster opponent, or forced into a position where her speed was limited, her lack of skill became a liability. It was not the first time she had cause to regret not honing her taijutsu skills further, but it was the first time she felt so disappointed in herself because of it. I've failed, Naruto-sama, she thought despairingly. I don't care. Naruto spoke suddenly. It doesn't matter how long it will take me. I'll master the Susutsuken, even if it takes me my whole life. Haku's eyes widened at Naruto's abrupt emotional shift. But you know. Naruto grinned at Haku. I'll master it faster than anyone else. Haku stared in amazement. Time and time again Naruto's enthusiasm and determination took her by surprise. His resilience was an incredible thing in Haku's eyes. Yes. Haku agreed cheerfully, believing it with all of her heart. Naruto's grin grew wider. The happiness he felt at Haku's sincere belief in him was almost indescribable. Never before had anyone believed so strongly in him, not even Irika-sensei. Let's start, he said excitedly. Haku nodded and gestured toward the stream. To begin, we need to get into the water. Why? Naruto could understand getting on the water, since that would help his chakra control in the long run, but in the water? As I said, the Susutsuken demands speed. One of the ways we practice is submerged in water. That way your muscles must constantly fight against the water to move. Naruto shrugged and waded into the center of the stream, shivering as the cold water washed over him. It was not a very deep body of water, but by the time Naruto reached the center he was chest deep in water. The rocky, uneven footing below made Naruto wary. It would be all too easy for his foot to get caught against the rock. Hey, how can I learn the footwork if we're in the water like this? Naruto demanded. I will teach some of it to you on land, Haku explained as she reached the center of the stream. Unlike Naruto, the cold water seemed to have no effect on her. The rest you will have to work out for yourself, based on my movements and the currents of water beneath the surface. Naruto boggled. Why? How am I supposed to do that? Determining movement by sensing the shifts in the flow of water around you is a chunin-level skill in Kirigakure, and it is extremely useful when you find yourself fighting in water. It also serves to provide the foundation for an even higher level skill, which becomes essential when you reach a high level of skill in the Susutsuken. A higher level skill? Yes. At high levels, the speed of a Susutsuken user is tremendous, to the point where the eyes alone are no longer enough to keep track of the enemy. You must be able to sense an enemy's movement through the disturbance it causes in the air. Is that possible? Naruto wondered skeptically. Zabuza-san told me it was, Haku said quietly. But since you plan on fully mastering the Susutsuken, you will undoubtedly find out for yourself. Right. Naruto agreed. Inwardly, he was chuckling gleefully at the prospect of having such a cool skill. Let's get started. Then, Haku's body shifted subtly, causing Naruto to tense. Let us begin. Naruto. Hatake Kakashi eyed his normal rambunctious student curiously. What happened to you? Morning light shone warmly down upon the bridge that was Team 7's regular meeting place. The birds were still chirping and the sound of water flowing beneath the bridge subtly filled the air. Nothing, Naruto replied quickly, smiling. It might have been more reassuring if his swollen, bruised face hadn't contorted so horrifically at the gesture. His whole body ached from his introduction to the Susutsuken the night before, but there was no way he was going to say that. He was going to surprise everyone with his kick-ass skills, and he couldn't do that if everyone found out before he could actually learn them. Kakashi looked at Sakura and Sasuke, the two most likely culprits, but they looked as curious as he was. Seeing that the boy wasn't eager to offer the details, Kakashi shrugged and began walking. Well, let's head to the administration building. Are we going to do a mission today, Kakashi-sensei? Sakura asked. Yes, the Jounin muttered distractedly. He was already engrossed in his book. Sakura's fists clenched angrily, and she stalked off after her teacher. Sasuke followed leisurely, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Naruto groaned and limped off after his teammates. Haku walked behind the genin as he shuffled down the street. Maybe I overdid it? Haku wondered worriedly. She had been very enthusiastic to teach Naruto, apparently a bit too enthusiastic. She wanted to apologize and help him, but she knew that Naruto's pride wouldn't allow him to accept either her apologies or her aid in walking. You're slow, Sasuke commented, smirking at Naruto as they reached the mission room. Shut up, Naruto snapped back reflexively. Oh ho! The Sandaime smiled as Team 7 came into the room. Here for a mission, are you? Yes, Hokage-sama, Kakashi replied, snapping his book shut. The Hokage grunted thoughtfully, shuffling through the various scrolls and papers on the table before him. Let's see. I hope it's not something lame again, Naruto muttered. Their last mission had been a quick D-rank mission to walk an old woman's dogs. Naruto had ended up stumbling into a training area and setting off a series of traps that had left him singed and sore for 2 days. Sakura and Sasuke rolled their eyes at his comment. Ah, here it is. Sarutobi smiled and lifted a scroll labeled with a big D. Naruto frowned. Hey, old man, not another D-rank mission, he complained. Sakura promptly hit him over the head. Are you an idiot? She yelled. Look what happened last time you said that. Sakura shook Naruto. What are you going to do if it happens again, huh? Huh? But Sakura-chan, he whined. Naruto, Kakashi sighed. We just got back from an A-rank mission not long ago. You want to take another C-rank mission already? Plus, we can't afford to get involved in another long mission, not with the Chunin exams coming up, Kakashi thought. Of course, he couldn't tell his students that. It would spoil the surprise. I need money, Naruto protested. My pay from the last mission won't last much longer, and then I'll have to dip into my savings. That was something he wanted to avoid if he could. Years of dealing with his own money, mostly due to the fact that he couldn't trust anyone to deal with it for him, had taught him enough for him to realize that he was in a precarious situation financially. 2 people consumed more resources than one, after all. D-rank missions don't pay well, he complained. Team 7 stared at their shortest member in surprise, and even the Sandaime's mouth opened in surprise. Haku raised a hand to her mouth, horrified at the implications. You're just being greedy? Sakura exploded in disbelief. What if we die this time, just because you want more money? That's not it, Naruto shouted back. He looked down at his sandals, shamefaced. I need money, he repeated. Sakura drew back, her anger draining out of her. She knew that Naruto was an orphan, but she had never considered what that meant. Her parents had always been around to support her financially, so she had never really thought about monetary matters too much. The money she earned from missions served as a supplement to the allowance she received from her parents. Naruto was on his own, especially since he had become an active ninja, and Sakura was aware of the fact that active ninja could no longer legally draw money from support and welfare programs. After she had realized that Sasuke-kun had been orphaned, she had thrown herself into research about the issue, daydreaming that she could sweep in and save her beggar prince from the streets. Eventually, she had found out that Sasuke-kun was the sole inheritor of the Uchiha clan's assets, which made the boy incredibly rich, even if the most of the money could not be accessed until he was 18. But Naruto had no inheritance at all. There was nothing to support the blonde genin, except for the missions Team 7 did. Sakura shuddered, wondering how much she took for granted. The Sandaime considered Naruto and Haku. He sighed heavily and reached for the C-rank mission scroll. Wordlessly, he scanned the scroll for an appropriate mission. Kakashi, the Hokage said without looking up. Is your team prepared for another C-rank mission? The Jounin glanced at Naruto, who looked back at him pleadingly. Huh, Kakashi smiled wryly, how can I refuse and end up starving my student? Yes, he told his superior. It was true, even if he hadn't wanted to accept a C-rank mission. His students had survived what was essentially an A-rank mission, after all. Their mettle had been tested and proven. In that case, Sarutobi said and tossed a small green scroll to Kakashi. This is your mission. Chapter 6, Broken Knives. He had seen it all before. He had seen the clean, unscarred limbs, the uncalloused hands, and the cocky, arrogant gleam in the eye that spoke of invincible confidence. He had seen it all 1,000 times before, in 1,000 different young men who had never put their hands in the fire. Once, it had been him. Takeda Shingo was a minor nobleman, the third son in an old, once influential samurai family. The family had had no need of a third son, no place for him in his own home. His older brothers had received the status and the lands. He had been given a sword and a commission. On the morning of his 16th birthday, he had found his possessions packed away and the army waiting. Father had been barely dead for 2 weeks when his brothers had him commissioned, exiled, though they hadn't said so. For the honor of the family, Jakatsu, the second son, had said. 14 years had passed since that fateful day. 14 years, and only the gods and his ancestors knew how many battles, how many skirmishes, how many corpses and lost friends, but he had survived. A minor nobleman, a veteran soldier, and a samurai down to his bones, he had not been particularly surprised when the generals, in their infinite wisdom, had made him an infantry officer a few months ago. Conflict was coming. Shingo could feel it. As such, he hadn't been particularly pleased by his promotion, either. While a captain's life expectancy on the front lines was greater than a lieutenant's, which measured somewhere below that of a fly in volcano country, it was not that much greater, especially when one was a captain in Taki no Kuni, where such officers were expected to lead their men from the front. He prayed dearly that he would be promoted to major soon. They weren't expected to fight with their men. But Shingo had been a soldier for more than a decade, and he knew how futile it would be to contest his orders. Besides, it was an honor. He snorted bitterly. That was why he was sitting at a large, dark wooden table in a relatively clean bar called Akahana in Akadashire, the fourth largest city in the country of Waterfall. He may have been an infantry officer, but as long as the uneasy peace held, he was simply a recruiter for the daimyo's forces. It didn't really matter in the long run. Once war broke out, the daimyo would conscript all of the infantry he needed. Still, perhaps with a month or two of training, at least some of these poor fools will survive their first real fight. Life and the army had taught Shingo that while experience may have been the best teacher, it only passed on its lessons if you managed to survive it. In any case, it wasn't like the generals were banging down his door for advice, and the steak in this bar wasn't as bad as it could have been. Shingo gazed appraisingly at the young man before him. The boy was pale-skinned, dark-haired, and brown-eyed. All in all, he was just another unexceptional, soft noble's son with that arrogant look in his eyes that all young nobles' sons seemed to share. Arrogance, pride in his heritage, belief that he was superior based solely on the merits of his blood, it was all stamped into his frame and bearing. Shingo was from nobility, no matter what his occupation or lot in life was, and he had dealt with hundreds, if not thousands of others from the same stock. He had learned to recognize them as soon as he saw them. Their appearances could be deceiving, but they could never hide the impression their heritage had branded into them. Your name? Shingo asked gruffly. Taro, was the prompt, flat reply. Shingo scribbled down the name, despite the fact that it was probably false. Taro looked down his fine nose at Shingo. The older man snorted to himself. That'll be fixed, as soon as he gets into his first fight. Few men ever came out of the infantry without having their noses broken at least once, usually by their own comrades. Fights were frequent in the camps, where boredom, resentment, and fear mixed and made tempers run hot. Age? 16. Probably another lie. This boy was a classic runaway noble's son. He didn't bother to ask where the boy came from. Any combat training? Taro hesitated. Kenjutsu, he said finally. Shingo nodded, scrawling a quick succession of characters inside the small box on the grimy paper. It might even have been true. Kenjutsu was the most common martial art taught amongst the samurai and the nobility. If it wasn't true, then the boy would receive a very harsh object lesson about the wisdom of lying. Finally, he turned the form to face Taro and pushed an ink pad forward. Stamp your fingerprint here, he ordered, tapping a small box near the bottom of the form. And sign at the bottom. Taro hesitated, his eyes darting left for a brief moment. A scowl twitched on Shingo's lips as he turned his head. There was nothing suspicious to his right. A young serving girl moved between the rectangular tables, a heavily laden tray casually balanced on her right hand. Shingo looked expectantly at Taro. Taro pushed his ink-covered thumb down on the paper and hastily scrawled an awkward-looking signature. He hasn't had to write his name much, Shingo observed. Or, his bitter sneer deepened, he hasn't been taught to write well. Old memories tried to push their way forward. He forced them back down. He had not been that boy for more than a decade. Shingo gave the form a quick once-over, making sure everything was in place, before tossing it on top of a pile of paper to his left. Report here tonight at 9, Shingo said tersely. Be ready to leave. Taro only nodded, turning to leave. A breeze stirred Shingo's stack of forms, forcing the soldier to scramble to keep them from flying off the desk. He scowled as he restacked his pile of completed application forms. Shingo stood and searched for any errant sheets of paper. He sighed as he saw the white sheets scattered on the grimy wooden floor. Girl, he barked. There was no reply. He looked around the room, ignoring the gazes of the other patrons. The serving girl was gone. The crinkled map stirred slightly as the wind drifted through the trees. The setting sun dappled the ground in liquid gold as the light filtered through the dense tree canopies. Team 7 was gathered in a silent circle around a weathered tree stump. A map of Taki no Kuni was laid out on top of the stump, held down by several small rocks. Kakashi was silent and thoughtful, his eyes studying the map as if it would reveal the enemy's secrets if he looked hard enough. Sasuke brooded, glaring at nothing in particular. Despite the excitement earlier in the day, he was beginning to feel that this mission was a waste of time. Ducking in and out of the shadows and fooling civilians wasn't going to make him stronger. That man was still pulling away while he wasted his time babysitting a pair of incompetents. Sakura stood pensively, mutely darting her eyes between the three shinobi around her. The continued silence was unsettling her, and Sasuke's rising moodiness worried her. She desperately hoped that he would not revert to the angry, almost vicious attitude he had adopted in the wave. Perhaps missions outside the village had a bad effect on him. She wasn't sure, but she prayed that things wouldn't end up like they did last time. Naruto glared at the map, absently chewing on a strip of dried beef. He was trying to recall exactly how to read the map in front of him. Not for the first time, he wished he had paid more attention in Irika-sensei's classes. Luckily no one had spoken up yet. He had been given enough time to begin to decipher the strange symbols and the many different kinds of squiggly lines that covered the map. Blue lines were rivers, dotted black lines were major roads, red lines were national borders, and solid black lines were, well, he hadn't figured that out yet, but he would. Eventually. Sasuke, Kakashi spoke suddenly. The meeting is at 9 o'clock? Sasuke nodded. That's what I said, he grumbled irritably. Sakura, Sasuke, you two will head back out and join the recruits at the meeting tonight. Find out where their camp is. Naruto and I will. Sensei, Sakura interrupted. Why can't you just find the camp yourself? It had been bugging her all day. They had been in Taki no Kuni for 2 days, and today was the first day they had actively begun collecting information. But Kakashi-sensei had spent all day sitting around and reading his book. She was sure he could have gotten all of the information they needed by now if he tried. Ugh. He's so irritating, Sakura complained mentally. Shinaro. She clenched her fist angrily for a moment. Kakashi-sensei smiled. At least, she thought he was smiling. Sakura, he began patiently. Would you learn anything if I did that? She blinked, taken aback. This is a good opportunity for you guys to gain some experience. If there's something you can't do, I'll step in. Until then. He trailed off and patted his equipment pouch fondly. Sakura's eyebrows twitched. They all knew where he kept his book. You just want to read your book, Naruto muttered accusingly, voicing Sakura's thoughts. Did you say something, Naruto? Naruto grunted and resumed his methodical chewing of beef jerky. Sakura rolled her eyes at his gluttony. Honestly, how much is he going to eat? Another thought occurred to her. Naruto, where did you get beef jerky? In town, he replied, still chewing. Sakura winced at the sight. Gross. Naruto, you were supposed to be looking for information on where the daimyo's soldiers are gathering. Kakashi mildly rebuked the boy. I was. Naruto protested immediately. The old man in the store gave this to me. You were gathering information in a store? Sasuke asked sardonically. Naruto looked at Sasuke. Yes, Naruto said slowly, as if talking to an idiot. Sasuke glared, unappreciative of the other boy's tone. Idiot, he sneered. Naruto's fists clenched convulsively. Ma, calm down you two. Kakashi's even voice was like a splash of cold water. On. Naruto nodded, his voice still tight with tension. He wordlessly stabbed a finger down on the map. Kakashi blinked, looking at the map. The other two genin followed suit. What is it? The jounin asked, glancing back up at Naruto. Ninjin Rock. Naruto grunted around a fresh mouthful of dried beef. It's supposed to look like a carrot, I guess. I see that, Kakashi retorted, a hint of sharpness entering his voice. What about it? General, what was it? Air. General Taka something or other's troops are gathering near Ninjin Rock. That's where all the, conscripts from Ikeda are going. Naruto folded his arms and nodded proudly. He had remembered everything. I even remembered conscripts. If he had forgotten that word, taught to him earlier in the day by Sakura-chan, his crush probably would have given him a thorough chewing out. The other members of Team 7 stared at Naruto, aghast. Kakashi was the first to recover from his surprise. He chuckled. I shouldn't be surprised, he chided himself. After all, I was the one that named him the most unpredictable ninja in Konoha. After everything that had happened, he still ended up underestimating Naruto. It was difficult to remember that Naruto had grown into a capable genin since he was still as loud and overconfident as ever. You found this out from the old man at the shop? Kakashi questioned. Yup. Naruto grinned at Sasuke, who was scowling fiercely. What kind of shop was this? Sakura asked. She was miffed that her and Sasuke's elaborate plan to infiltrate a troop of recruits and gain information from the inside had apparently been outdone by Naruto, who had walked into a shop and gained more information in a couple of minutes than they had over the course of the entire day. Naruto shrugged. A grocer? A general store? I don't know. And you believe this old man? Sasuke scoffed. Yes, Naruto bit out. Armies have to eat, right? That old man sends lots of food to Taka-something's troops. Follow the food, huh? Kakashi smiled. It was a particular bit of common sense that he hadn't expected from Naruto. Indeed, few genin would think of pursuing such a basic strategy. Sasuke's plot to pose as a new recruit was risky and full of pitfalls, but it was the kind of thing most genin, and many experienced ninja, thought of first. Kakashi nodded decisively. All right, we'll check out Naruto's lead. Now, sensei? Sakura asked plaintively. She had been traveling and snooping around all day, and she was tired. And now we have to go all of the way to this Ninjin Rock place? She sighed. Damn it, Naruto, she complained inwardly, but without heat. She knew that he was only doing his job, and she couldn't muster much more than mild irritation towards him. Though the fact that he had done so much better than Sasuke-kun, and by extension, herself as well, stung. In doing so he had probably saved her a lot more work. Infiltrating a group of new recruits would have required Sasuke-kun to maintain henge for an extended duration, which carried a strong risk of discovery, not to mention the effort involved and the exhaustion that would result. Sakura herself would have had to shadow the group and remain undetected for the duration of the plan, in order to back up Sasuke if it became necessary to fight. Naruto's way was much simpler, and in the long run it would save them a great deal of effort. But in the short run, it denied her a decent amount of rest and quality time with Sasuke-kun, even if it was only watching him from a distance. Sakura sighed as she rose to her feet along with the boys. Kakashi lifted the map off the stump and studied it intently for several moments before nodding and folding the map up. All right, Kakashi said crisply, shouldering his pack. Let's go. The quiet ticking of the wall-mounted clock reverberated through the still apartment. Outside, Haku could hear the bustle of daily life dying down as the sun began to set. The shadows grew long on the walls. Shouting erupted outside as a couple began to argue. Haku ignored it, unable to muster the slightest bit of interest. Instead, her eyes remained fixed on the clock. 6:29, the clock reported. 3 days, 9 hours, and 19 minutes, Haku whispered to herself. She shivered, rubbing her arms furtively. Naruto-sama will return, she told herself. Failure. A minute passed. Haku rose abruptly. She rummaged through the cupboards, humming quietly. There was a clicking noise, and then the soft whisper of the gas stove igniting. She placed a pot full of water on the stove and glided over to the fridge. Her tune became thoughtful as she contemplated the various ingredients stored in the refrigerator. Flawed tool. Haku washed the vegetables vigorously. Naruto-sama didn't like to eat vegetables, but it was necessary for him to eat a balanced diet. She moved the produce over to the cutting board, which was still unweathered by age and unscratched by use. The kitchen knife she produced was similarly shiny and new. It sliced cleanly and effortlessly through a carrot. Haku paused, looking at the new knife, the unscratched cutting board, the fresh carrot in her hand. Her head drooped, and her eyelids lowered. Her humming faltered. You're too naive, as usual. She gazed blankly at the gleaming blade in her hand. I don't want you to die. The steady sound of vegetables being chopped filled the room, accompanied by a different tune. When she was finished dicing the vegetables, she pushed them off the cutting board and onto a plate. A slab of beef took their place. Methodically, Haku began to cut the meat into smaller chunks. Kid, do you want to be kneaded by someone? Can you give everything to me? The dried beef stock turned the clear water murky. Haku carefully lifted the wooden slat and allowed the beef to slide into the boiling broth. She opened another cupboard and brought out an electric rice cooker. Grains of rice clattered against the metal pot as she poured several cups in. She glanced at the clock. 6:52. 3 days, 9 hours, and 42 minutes. If you need a reason to live, then do it for me. Then, starting today, your ability is mine. Haku shivered violently. Absently, she rubbed her arms as she stood in Naruto-sama's small kitchen. She listened to the sound the broth made as it bubbled, punctuated by the ticking of the clock. The noises from outside faded away into the background, becoming meaningless noise. Time stretched between the steady tick of the clock. Still, she waited. The rice cooker let out a shrill, sharp noise. Haku blinked slowly, once, twice, and her eyes refocused on the clock. 7:22. 3 days, 10 hours, and 12 minutes. The rice was done. The stew would still take another half hour, at least. Haku went into the bedroom and set the alarm before returning to the kitchen. She sat daintily on a chair at the kitchen table and leaned forward, cradling her head in her arms. The clock ticked. A brat like you won't be needed by anyone, and you'll die a beggar. For as long as I'm alive, I'll need you. The harsh beeping of the alarm roused Haku to awareness. Wincing, she staggered to her feet and lethargically shuffled into the bedroom to shut off the alarm. She walked slowly back into the kitchen to check the soup. It took her several moments and a bit of rummaging to find the soup ladle. Armed with the kitchen implement, she delicately took a sip of the steaming broth and used it to check the meat's tenderness. Not done, she murmured, and began to stir. It was 7:52. 3 days, 10 hours, and 42 minutes. Will you follow me? Come with me. What's your status? Kakashi's hushed voice, warped by a hint of background static, sounded in the earpiece of Sasuke's headset. I'm in position. Sasuke murmured softly into the microphone as he came to a stop at the edge of a large clearing. To his right, Sasuke could dimly make out the vast shadow of Nijin Rock. He didn't really think that it looked like a carrot, but then again he only had moonlight to see by, and even that was obscured by clouds. Sasuke crouched on the rough, broad tree branch and studied the camp through the leaves. To his vision it was a mass of dark shadows, flickering fire, and dirty canvas. Guards patrolled the camp and the outskirts. Focusing on the shadowy figures below him, he tried to read their movements, to understand their intent, and smirked as it became apparent that they were patrolling in a set pattern. The sentries posted around the edges of the camp huddled close to their fires, sacrificing night vision for comfort. Too easy, he scoffed mentally. I'm in position too. Sakura's voice crackled through the earpiece. A minute passed quietly. Cicadas chirped noisily, and occasionally the leaves rustled as a breeze blew through the trees. In the distance, he could hear the murmur of the military camp, not quite asleep even as the moon climbed high amidst the stars. Sasuke continued to eye the guards intently, studying their patterns. The wireless radio came to life again in a small burst of static. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto is... Sakura's query trailed off. Sasuke's brows climbed in surprise at the worry he heard in her voice. Since when has she ever worried about Naruto? Sasuke wondered. Sure, she worried over things Naruto did, but he had never heard her voice much concerned for Naruto's well-being. Sasuke frowned thoughtfully. He knew that the two had started training together occasionally, and he had seen some, very slight, improvement in both of them. Perhaps the two things were related. Sasuke dismissed his wandering thoughts. It's not my concern. Naruto has to work his way around to the east side of the camp, Kakashi answered Sakura. Give him a few more minutes. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Kakashi coddled the dropout too much. If it had been Sasuke, he would have made it around the camp by now. Absently, Sasuke drew a kunai and began to casually flip it. Naruto stared down nervously at the helmeted heads of the two soldiers. He was currently clutching the trunk of the tree he was perched in. Naruto didn't dare to move. If he made the slightest bit of noise, the two soldiers loitering less than 10 feet below him would probably hear. If they heard, they would probably look up. If they looked up, he was definitely screwed. Kakashi-sensei had been very clear on that. Naruto, Kakashi-sensei began, his tone serious, as they walked towards Taki no Kuni. I need you to remember that this is a very sensitive recon mission. We can't afford to let anyone know that we're Konoha shinobi, and we especially can't let anyone know what our mission is. Naruto scowled, folding his arms across his chest. He was definitely irritated by their mission. Of course, leaving Sasuke and Sakura alone at point didn't help. I know, Naruto grumbled discontentedly. Naruto, Kakashi-sensei sighed. Not every mission is about fighting, you know. I know, but… Naruto trailed off, uncertain as to how to convey his frustration. Why do we have to do such a boring mission? He muttered sullenly. How do you know it's going to be boring? His teacher asked after a pause. All we're going to do is look around for some big camps or something, right? That's boring. We're not just going to look around for big camps, Kakashi-sensei retorted. We are going to Taki no Kuni to determine whether or not Konoha and the Country of Fire need to prepare for war. Naruto gaped. War? He asked in a small voice, stunned. Kakashi-sensei flipped his book closed. Why do you think we're going to survey their troop movements? Hokage-sama thinks that Waterfall's daimyo is planning for a war. The reason we are going to the Country of Waterfall in the first place is to gather information as to whether or not our country is in danger. It's that important? Naruto asked quietly, his mood somber. Kakashi-sensei nodded. That's why you need to be careful about what you say and do on this mission. If you blurt something out to the wrong person, our entire mission could be jeopardized. Kakashi-sensei turned his head to meet Naruto's eyes. We don't know what Taki no Kuni's agenda is, so if they find out that our team is spying on their military, it could become an international incident. I understand. Naruto nodded grimly. If they were caught, it could very well start a war, even if that wasn't the Waterfall daimyo's intentions in the first place. Naruto, if you get caught, if any of us gets found out by someone… Kakashi-sensei sighed and looked up at the sky. Sensei. Silence them. Naruto still recalled the sickening lurch his stomach had made at those words. He felt queasy just thinking about the implications of his teacher's order. But what really made him sick was the fact that he understood the logic behind it. If they got caught, a war could start. But if they killed anyone who found them out, war might be averted. Naruto grimaced as he anxiously stared down at the two young men who were joking with each other as they swapped contraband. At least, he thought that was what they were doing. Rations, cigarettes, and what looked to be a can of beer traded hands along with money. Naruto, if you get caught… Listening to the two wayward sentries below, Naruto came to the conclusion that they couldn't be that much older than him, 4 or 5 years maybe, but not much older. They were fresh recruits, or more likely conscripts, not trained soldiers. One was an avid smoker, the other had a strong thirst for alcohol, and both hated the food cooked in the camp. The smoker came from Ikeda, the drinker from Taki's capital. Neither was married, but both were young enough to have a home and a family to go back to. Naruto closed his eyes. Silence them. He heard Sasuke and Sakura-chan as they reported their status. Naruto mustered a faint smile as he heard Sakura-chan's concern for him. Kakashi-sensei had faith that he would get in position. Somehow, looking down at the two below him, he couldn't remain glad for long. The minutes stretched on. Naruto counted every beat of his heart as he waited, a hand on a kunai, for the moment when one of the sentries below looked up. He breathed a silent sigh of relief when they left. Naruto remained still for several more moments, making sure that they weren't about to double back, before bounding off through the trees at a reckless pace. His team was still waiting for him, after all. It took him 2 more minutes to reach his designated position. Luckily, there were no more wayward soldiers or outlying pickets. Naruto slumped against the trunk of the tree he had taken up residence in, panting. After taking a moment to catch his breath, he reached up to his neck and pressed the talk button on his radio headset. I'm in position, he reported quietly. The response was immediate. Finally, Sasuke grunted irritably. You're so slow, Naruto. Sakura-chan chided, but he thought he could hear a hint of relief in her voice. All right, Kakashi-sensei said. Are you all ready? He received 3 affirmatives. Go! Their target was in sight. It had taken his genin 15 minutes to locate and make their way to the general's tent. To Kakashi, that was at least 10 minutes too long, especially since he hadn't even been able to read his precious book while he waited for them to arrive. It was yet another thing to put on his list of things to train his team in. Admittedly, he hadn't gotten very far down the list yet, but it was good to at least keep it in mind. Still, things had been going well, his team's mediocre infiltration skills aside. They had successfully snuck into the camp and Sasuke had located the most probable location for sensitive information to be kept. Of course, Sasuke should have taken the time to secure the area or at least scout it thoroughly for threats before radioing his teammates with the coordinates, but that was a point for later. The rest of Team 7 had converged on the area in short order, all without raising the alarm. It had come very close several times, but they had done it. It had helped that the camp was largely asleep. Sentries still stood watch and patrols roamed the camp, but it was clear that no one was expecting anything untoward to happen. The patrol patterns were easy enough to figure out and evade. The only real risk came from stumbling upon an errant soldier or camp follower up past curfew. Naruto had very nearly given the whole operation away when he had crossed paths with a sleepy grunt staggering his way to the latrine. To the boy's credit, he had reacted swiftly and concealed himself well, but the shadow clone Kakashi had sent to watch over Naruto had been forced to quickly whip out a genjutsu to convince the man that he had just been imagining things. Team 7 had met up behind the large but otherwise unremarkable tent of General Takamasa, concealed by a profusion of supply barrels. The wooden barrels were rough and smelled of sap and mildew. They had been constructed hastily, the wood improperly seasoned. Kakashi's sensitive nose wrinkled in distaste at the smell of hundreds of pounds of salted pork and damp, and soon to be moldy, biscuits as he stepped out of the shadows to meet his team. Kakashi silently lifted a hand and gestured quickly. All shinobi villages had a system of silent commands, and Konoha was no different. Students were trained in the basic system used by Konoha before they graduated the academy. Eventually, as their career progressed and they ascended in rank and experience, they would learn more advanced versions of the system. For now, though, Kakashi was restricted to the gestures that all genin knew. Supposedly, at least, Kakashi thought to himself, amused. But if Naruto didn't recognize the hand signal, he gave no sign of it. There was a silent flurry of movement as his 3 students darted from their hiding places and snuck up to the rear of the large square tent. Kakashi waited for several moments, observing them and checking the surroundings for any hint that they had been noticed, before joining them. Kakashi crouched and put his ear against the canvas. He listened carefully, trying to isolate and catalog every noise he heard through the thick canvas walls of the tent. It didn't sound like anyone was moving or even awake, given the faint, snore-like noises he had heard. The Jounin gestured for his team to proceed. They hesitated, looking at him for guidance, but Kakashi remained still. All right, he thought, show me what you've learned. They may have been on an important mission, and in the middle of a potentially hostile camp, but he might not have such a perfect opportunity to assess them again. Their actions in the field spoke far louder than their actions during training did. It was a good training opportunity as well. This mission was a perfect way to teach them practical stealth and information-gathering skills, and Naruto and Sasuke were more suited to hands-on learning anyway. If they screwed up, well, that was why he was with them. Sasuke was the first to take action. When it became apparent to him that Kakashi wasn't going to take the lead, Sasuke drew a kunai from his pouch. He carefully sliced into the canvas and worked his way downward, cutting a slit in the tent that extended to the ground. Kakashi had to restrain himself from speaking up. Cutting a hole in the side of the tent meant leaving evidence that they had been there. But he was the one who had decided to let the kids handle it, and as long as nothing else was out of place, it wasn't an unforgivable error. Sasuke cautiously peered into the tent. The interior of the tent was dark and cast in shadow. Dimly, he could make out the shape of a desk near the front, and there was a small rack of scrolls and books beside it. Next to the rack was a chest. Seeing no one, he then poked his head through. To his left was a small bed, or a big cot, and Sasuke could see, and hear, the sleeping man upon it. But there were no guards within the tent, nor any other person besides the sleeping soldier, who was most likely General Takamasa. Satisfied that the tent was clear, he slipped through the hole. Naruto stared after Sasuke for a moment. "There's no way I'm letting that bastard get all the glory again." He grimaced as the image of Sasuke standing over him, bloodied and covered in a veritable forest of saban, flashed across his mind. Naruto stepped towards the slit in the tent. A hand clamped down on his shoulder. Kakashi-sensei shook his head in warning and firmly raised a hand. The gesture was clear. You stay here. Naruto's expression tightened and for a moment he glared up at his teacher. A silent struggle of wills occurred for a few seconds. Naruto huffed in discontent, folded his arms, and looked away. Kakashi's steely gaze had left no room for argument. Another gesture followed. Stand watch. Sakura complied briskly, moving to find a good vantage point nearby. Naruto's scowl deepened as he sullenly crept to find his own lookout point. It's always Sasuke, he thought bitterly. Sasuke always got to do the cool things. Sasuke always got to play the hero. When would Naruto get to be the hero? When would he get the chance to prove himself, and not end up biting the dust as he watched Sasuke's back? Naruto bit his lip. Stop it, he told himself fiercely. He was not so weak. He didn't need a pity party to make himself feel better. So what if Sasuke got to look cool and he didn't? One day, things would change. He would work harder. He would get stronger. Eventually, it would be Sasuke staring at his back. It would be Sasuke who struggled to keep pace with him. One day, Sasuke confidently moved towards the dimly lit desk, where a small lantern still glowed with faint, flickering yellow light. A hand clamped down on his left shoulder. Sasuke turned his head sharply, tensing, but it was only Kakashi. The Jounin shook his head warningly and jerked his head towards the sleeping general. Sasuke scowled. Kakashi gestured again. Irritated, the boy moved next to the cot to keep an eye on the sleeping man. Kakashi quickly moved to the desk and began to scan the maps, documents, and scrolls that covered its surface. The paranoid Jounin searched as quickly as he was able to without risking sloppiness. Standing in the light set his nerves on edge and he wanted to finish the job as quickly as possible. If he could have, he would have preferred to extinguish the light. Unfortunately, he needed it if he was to sort out the jumble of papers in front of him. Even the Sharingan was not capable of seeing something so mundane as ink in the dark. Despite how quickly he was skimming the documents, it took him several minutes to finish searching the desk and determine that there were no hidden traps or compartments. Setting aside the documents he needed, Kakashi moved over to the rack next to the desk and began his search anew. Kakashi remained calm and steady, not allowing himself to rush despite the risks of his prolonged search or the clamor of his shinobi instincts. However, a quick glance at Sasuke revealed that the boy was growing increasingly impatient. Kakashi was quite good at reading the emotions behind Sasuke's various glares, and at the moment his glare was definitely an impatient one, not to mention a little irritated at being regulated to watching a grown man snore while Kakashi did the meaningful work. Finally, Kakashi had finished inspecting all of the documents he could lay his hands on. He had checked the chest, only to find that it contained nothing more interesting than the general's clothes. A careful inspection of the rest of the tent had yielded no concealed hiding places. He quickly gathered the relevant documents and laid them out neatly on the floor. He reached for one of the pockets on his vest. Deft fingers opened the compartment and snatched the scroll that dropped out. With a quick flick of his wrists, the scroll was unraveled and laid out on the ground. Kakashi removed a brush and a bottle of ink from his equipment pouch and feverishly began to ink esoteric seals and characters onto the blank scroll. When he was done, he put away the brush and ink bottle and focused his chakra and mind sharply. Quickly, but deliberately, he began to form seals. An invisible flow of chakra flowed from the kneeling Jounin into the scroll at his knees. Sasuke watched, rapt, the hairs on his arms standing up, as his sensei performed a few ninjutsu. Kakashi finished the long chain of seals, his hands locking in the Torai seal formation, and exhaled slightly. Tensha Fuin! His chakra immediately snapped into place within the ink seals on the scroll, completing the transcription seal. Kakashi focused his will, and within seconds streamers of chakra rose from the center of the seal array and began to engulf the documents and scrolls laid out nearby. Kakashi remained focused and still, constantly forcing more chakra into the complex seal array while it did its work. As the seconds dragged on, beads of sweat began to form on his brow. A slight tightening around his eyes hinted at the strain he was beginning to feel. It took over a minute for the seal to finish its work. When it was done, Kakashi sagged slightly, his mind exhausted, his blood pounding painfully behind his eyes. He instinctively reached up to wipe the sweat off his brow, only for his fingers to come into contact with cool metal. Kakashi smiled wryly as he looked at his smudged fingers. I forgot about that. His Hittite, as well as his Genin's Hittite, had been darkened with a makeshift mixture of tree sap, dirt, and the ashes from the last fire they had enjoyed, back in Fire Country. Hittite were made with dull, unpolished steel, and their surfaces were not very reflective, especially at night. Even so, a bright light shone on a Hittite at night could reveal the ninja wearing it to a sharp-eyed observer. It was standard for shinobi to darken their Hittite, if they didn't take them off completely, for missions where stealth and anonymity were essential. Kakashi quickly wiped his fingers off so that he wouldn't leave any smudges behind. The copy meme then wrapped his scroll up and stuffed it into his backpack. He gathered the documents and quickly returned them to their places. His sharp memory and years of experience and training allowed him to place them all in their proper places on the rack, but the documents he had found on the desk were trickier. Still, he quickly dumped the papers on the desk and began to shuffle them into the closest approximation he was capable of within the limited time frame he had left to him. Sakura watched Naruto out of the corner of her eye. She could practically feel the frustration rolling off of him. To her surprise, she could understand it. Training with Naruto on a daily basis had often left her too tired to yell at him every time he opened his mouth to say something idiotic. She was often too tired to do anything but listen to him ramble, and occasionally what she heard surprised her. Naruto was frustrated at being left behind by Sasuke-kun, at being belittled and ignored. That had startled her. She had thought that simple jealousy was behind Naruto's quarrel with Sasuke-kun. But Sakura understood. She felt just a bit frustrated herself. It stung sometimes, and it hurt when she wasn't able to deny Kakashi-sensei's blunt criticisms. Sakura had trained hard in the few weeks since their return from the wave. At first, she hadn't thought that training with Naruto would show much in the way of results, but she had been forced to concede that she was improving. Not dramatically, of course, but she thought that she was better off than before she had started. Her control felt a little bit sharper, and her taijutsu seemed to come easier to her, felt more natural to her, than it had before. Naruto was a close combat fighter, through and through, and she had been pushed to adapt to fighting him. Once she had pounded it through his thick skull that sparring with his Sakura-chan, she shuddered, was not only all right but actually expected. Sakura had been hard-pressed to keep up with him as Naruto's competitive spirit and obsession with becoming stronger shone through. Truthfully, she had been astonished at how difficult, not to mention tiring, sparring with Naruto was for her. That wasn't to say that she had been helpless though. Naruto may have been faster and stronger than her, not to mention the fact that he could be surprisingly tricky when he wanted to be and his stamina was frankly ridiculous, but she had her own advantages. After all, Naruto was the dead last, while she was the smartest kunoichi of her generation. She still occasionally wondered what kind of miracle had allowed him to scrape his way through the academy, given the gaps in his basic shinobi training. As soon as she adapted to being pressed into close combat with him, she quickly learned how to leverage her own talents against her loud teammate. Superior taijutsu training had helped her blunt the edge he held in strength and speed. Her precise chakra control had let her keep up with Blonde Ball of Energy, and allowed her to pull off complex maneuvers that Naruto couldn't quite manage, giving her an edge when the two had fought in the trees or on top of the stream that ran through the training ground. Then Sakura stopped playing fair, and Naruto learned why it never paid to underestimate her. It had taken her several days and several painful, and slightly humiliating, losses before she could bring herself to admit that Naruto was just better at planning on his feet than she was. It galled her to admit it, but in hindsight she knew she shouldn't have been surprised, given the way he had produced the plan to free Kakashi-sensei from Zabuza's water prison so quickly. But while Naruto was good at situational tactics and improvisation, Sakura had a decisive edge when strategizing. Once she had applied her mind, and a judicious use of kawarimi, bunshin, and henge, not to mention all the traps she had laid for Naruto over the past 2 weeks, her streak of losses had been replaced by a string of victories. It had felt good to finally release the stress, fear, anger, and confusion that had been building up inside of her ever since the horrible mission in Wave Country. Being too tired and sore to walk properly had meant she was too tired to worry and second-guess herself, too tired to toss restlessly in bed, plagued by self-doubts and recriminations. For the first time since they had returned from the wave, Sakura had started to sleep well, even if it was the deep, dreamless sleep of the exhausted. Even when she wasn't tired out of her mind from training, she didn't worry as much. It almost seemed as if her negative thoughts and emotions were being bled out of her pores along with her sweat. She was stronger. She knew it, and she knew that it was only a matter of time before Sasuke-kun and Kakashi-sensei realized it as well. When they did, Sakura wasn't quite sure what would happen, but she had spent a lot of time imagining it. But more than that, she was surprised that she felt pride at making Naruto stronger. He was learning to be more cautious, a side effect of stumbling headlong into Sakura's traps time and time again. His chakra control seemed a bit more refined. At least, Sakura thought that was what his sudden ability to use a simple bunshin to deceive her meant. But it was Naruto's ability to coordinate his Kage bunshin effectively that she was the most proud of. He had learned to disperse them, separate them into groups, and to keep them moving. Sakura had experienced firsthand the dramatic difference in his battle tactics. At first, Naruto's Kage bunshin had tended to act as one big mob, moving and attacking as one mass. Those that couldn't attack tended to just sit around and wait their turn, unless Naruto had some sneaky plan in the works. All in all, Naruto's Kage Bunshin had been wonderful fodder for her traps. After having his Kage Bunshin slaughtered by Sakura's traps and stratagems for the better part of a week, Naruto had eventually seen the flaws in the way he used his favorite technique. Or rather, they had been brutally highlighted for him. He had then begun experimenting with different tactics, and eventually he had sheepishly approached Haku, an ever-present observer in their training sessions, and asked for advice. When Naruto returned, he had been grinning eagerly. The difference had been immediate, and it had been all Sakura could do to get rid of Naruto's clones. After a few days, her traps rarely caught more than 1 or 2 clones at a time. She had found herself hounded, herded, and under pressure constantly. It had annoyed her, since the balance between them had once again swung towards Naruto. It was hard to believe that the talentless Naruto could improve as quickly as he had. She was sure Sasuke-kun would have improved much quicker, but then he would never have needed her help in the first place, and Sakura was quite proud of her teaching abilities. Without her help, Naruto surely wouldn't have gotten even half as far. Well, it was mostly due to her influence. Haku could take a lot of credit as well, which annoyed Sakura to no end. Once again, Sakura had been beaten by the older girl. It wasn't enough that Haku was older, better looking, and more skilled than Sakura. Haku was also at least as smart as her, and more perceptive besides. Sakura had not been sure as to how to help Naruto improve his usage of his favorite ninjutsu, but Haku had come up with a workable and highly successful answer almost instantly. A part of that was no doubt due to Haku's superior skill and practical experience, but that just made it rankle more. Aren't I supposed to be the smartest kunoichi of my generation? Sakura had wondered, back in the safety of her room. Yet Haku's introduction into her life had eroded her certainty. Doubts had plagued Sakura constantly since their return from the wave, not just about Sasuke, but about herself. At every turn, Haku stood above her. She had never felt so inferior in her life. Her big forehead and the issues it had caused her, and her admiration and jealousy of Ino both paled in comparison to how small she felt compared to Haku. The final, bitter nail on the coffin was the simple, almost overlooked fact that Naruto had gone to Haku for advice first. She hadn't even thought of it until she was almost asleep, but when she did sleep suddenly seemed far away. Naruto was supposed to be in love with her. It was annoying, but it was one of the facts of her life. Naruto was a nuisance and a hindrance to her love for Sasuke-kun. He had continually made fun of her Sasuke-kun and alternatively asked, begged, and cajoled her to go on dates with him, except that he didn't, not anymore. He was annoying, but he had been a constant. Suddenly, she could no longer count on his feelings for her. She didn't actually like Naruto or anything, and the fact that he was an annoyance was unchanged. Yet the fact that he had been taken away from her was irritating. Humiliating, her treacherous mind whispered. It was frustrating. Sort of like being left behind by Kakashi-sensei and Sasuke-kun was frustrating. Wasn't she stronger now? Hadn't she trained hard? She had pushed herself far harder than she ever had before in her training with Naruto. Sakura had trained until she could barely stand, until sweat had soaked deep into her clothes, pressing herself beyond what she thought were her limits. So why did Kakashi-sensei and Sasuke-kun still look down on her? Sakura knew that she was capable enough to handle nearly anything this mission required of her, yet she was relegated to a supporting role. Sakura could understand Naruto's frustration. She shared it. For the first time, she felt a need to prove herself to her team that had nothing to do with winning Sasuke-kun's affection. Not that she'd object to it. For a moment, the image of Sasuke-kun, his dark eyes glistening with manly tears while he fell to his knees and brought out a small, velvet-lined box darted across her mind. Sakura blushed brightly, resisting the urge to giggle. She shook her head, clearing away the fantasy. What she really wanted was Sasuke-kun's respect, or at least acknowledgement that she wasn't useless. Sakura wanted Sasuke-kun to acknowledge her as a ninja, and she wanted Kakashi-sensei to acknowledge her, to trust her abilities, as well. Sakura's lips quirked upward in a faint, wistful smile. Green eyes roved alertly, watching for any approaching threats. She listened intently, seeking to discern activity with her ears. Still nothing, she thought dully. Sakura had to hold back a yawn. Her adrenaline had long since faded, her pulse had slowed to a regular level, and she was bored. It had been a little over 15 minutes since her teacher and her love had entered the general's tent to search it for documents related to their mission, and as of yet they hadn't come out. Nothing else had happened in that time. She was left watching the uneventful camp and following the morbid, twisting trail of her thoughts, either of which were particularly exciting. She understood the importance of being vigilant, and she was far from falling asleep on the job, but she couldn't help but wish that her absent teammates would hurry up. A glance showed that Naruto was still stewing. Her blonde teammate was glaring at nothing in particular, or everything, even as his eyes moved watchfully. His fists were clenching and unclenching slowly, methodically. She guessed that he was imagining wrapping his hands around Kakashi-sensei's, or, more likely, Sasuke-kun's throat. Sakura felt a tiny flash of indignation that Naruto was fantasizing about choking the object of her affections. Sakura didn't dwell on that thought long, since Naruto's head jerked towards the tent swiftly. In the same moment, Sakura caught a flicker of movement from her peripheral vision. Alarmed, she followed Naruto's line of sight to the tent. Sakura's hand strayed down to her right leg, lightly touching the kunai holster. A head crowned by spiky silver hair popped out. "It's only Kakashi-sensei," Sakura sighed, relieved. The rest of Kakashi-sensei's body soon followed, after he had made sure that the area was clear, and Sasuke-kun came after him. Naruto and Sakura quickly rejoined the other two members of Team 7. As she drew near, Sakura could make out an odd bulge in Kakashi-sensei's backpack. A scroll poked out of a gap in the backpack's zipper. Kakashi-sensei followed her gaze. "We've gotten what we needed," the Jounin murmured quietly, speaking for the first time since they had entered the camp. "Now, let's get out of here." A chill breeze tousled Kakashi's hair as he lounged on a high, broad tree branch. The moon was obscured by a light cover of clouds. A cacophony of cicadas sang around Team 7's campsite. Beneath that, the wind carried the occasional cries and howls of distant animals. If Kakashi listened closely, he could hear the groans and creaks of the trees around him as their branches and numerous broad green leaves were stirred by the wind. 4 hours had passed since Team 7 had made their swift escape from General Takamasa's staging ground. Only 2 hours had passed since his students had bedded down, leaving him with the first watch. The Jounin had better things to do than sitting around in a dark forest and staring blankly at his surroundings, so he had summoned several nin dogs and sent them to patrol a wide perimeter around the camp. He had then thrown up a hastily rigged camouflage around himself, essentially just a large net covered with leaves and twigs, to break up any stray light that the tree's natural cover didn't block. After that, he had fished out a flashlight from his pack and gone to work. Despite the temptation, Kakashi had not pulled out his lovingly worn, much-read copy of Ika Ika Paradise. His students would have been proud of him. Instead, he had diligently spent the past 2 hours poring over the scroll Team 7 had spent the day acquiring. Kakashi now knew the general location of most of the Waterfall Daimyo's senior officers in the field. Moreover, he knew where their rally points were. His scroll, once a blank roll of paper, now revealed extensive details about Takamasa's day-to-day operations, including his budget, the daily amount of supplies his men consumed, and the training of his troops. Kakashi frowned. He hadn't seen anything to indicate the reasoning behind the massive increase in military activity in Waterfall in the documents he had copied. They hadn't even discovered General Takamasa's immediate orders, much less his long-term objectives. Of course, obtaining that information was not in his mission parameters, but he had hoped to find something more useful. Still, his team's raid had gone a long way to fulfilling their objectives. They were making good time. But there was more work to be done. While the information they had liberated from the general's tent had revealed much about the movement and positioning of Taki's forces, there were still close to a quarter of the daimyo's senior military officers unaccounted for. While it possible that they had remained behind in the capital, Kakashi wasn't about to declare the mission over until his team had confirmed things. More information was needed. Kakashi earnestly hoped that they would find more information about why Taki no Kuni was mobilizing its military. It wasn't their job to do so, but it bothered him. He was not about to risk their mission because of his curiosity, but the whole situation felt off. What was the point behind it all? As far as Kakashi knew, Waterfall wasn't facing any external threats. It made even less sense when he considered that Takigakure no Sato had been destroyed recently in a civil war. The country of Waterfall was in no position to start a war with anyone, and provoking the country of fire was just about the last thing it needed. Even if the country was facing an external threat, taking such a provocative stance was the height of stupidity. The country of Earth was not about to invade Waterfall. Not only did the small country lack the abundance of precious resources, or any other suitably favorable assets, that would make such a move profitable, such an action would pitch Iiwa and Konoha into war. Waterfall was an ally of Hai no Kuni. In actuality, it was more like a satellite nation, and both countries had a long-standing mutual defense treaty. Any invasion of Taki would draw the Fire Country and Konoha into war with the aggressors. After Iwa's defeat, and by extension Tsuchi no Kuni's defeat, at the hands of Konoha in the last war, it was doubtful that they would be eager to match themselves against the Leaf anytime soon. Essentially, it boiled down to the fact that alienating the Waterfall's greatest protector was an extremely foolish move, if Waterfall was in fact being threatened. The Fire Daimyo and the Sand Daimyo were worried, which meant that they thought that Taki no Kuni might cause direct harm to the country of fire, or at least serve to destabilize the region. To Kakashi, That seemed like a strong hint that the waterfall daimyo was not worried about being attacked. But war against either Tsuchi no Kuni or Hai no Kuni, both members of the 5 great nations, would be suicide for Taki no Kuni. If the waterfall was indeed intending to start a war, the more likely targets would be Kusa no Kuni to the southwest or Na no Kuni to the east. But the country of grass possessed a shinobi village, while waterfalls had been all but destroyed, and in any case grass was allied with earth and the fire country had no obligation to help waterfall if it was the aggressor. Even attacking Na no Kuni was not rational. The vegetable country was a weak nation, with few urban population centers and a weak standing military. As its name implied, it was a land of agriculture. The population, which consisted largely of farmers, was distributed sparsely. Any attacker would find Na no Kuni ill-prepared to mobilize a defense. Yet Na no Kuni was a prominent exporter of produce and an ally of the country of fire. If Taki attacked, it would soon find itself embroiled in a war against its mighty southern neighbor. Kakashi sighed. It doesn't make sense, he thought, mildly frustrated. He had been an Anbu captain for too long not to let such mysteries bother him, but he just couldn't see any rational explanation for the waterfall daimyo's actions or determine the man's intent. Team 7's Jounin-sensei shrugged. No use worrying about it now, he decided. There would be plenty of time in the morning to contemplate things. Until then. Kakashi reached for the pouch that contained his book. His hand froze. I need sleep, he told himself firmly. Even so, his hand wavered. Just for a couple of minutes, he reasoned. The pounding headache behind his eyes and the sluggishness seeping through his limbs convinced him otherwise. Kakashi switched the flashlight off, wincing at the spike of pain as his pupils adjusted to the sudden absence of light despite how dim the artificial beam had been. Carefully, he re-rolled the hard-won scroll and bound it with a length of wire. Once both the flashlight and the scroll were packed away, he slipped the straps of his pack around his shoulders, retrieved his makeshift camouflage netting, and hopped off his perch. For an instant, the sounds of the night were drowned out by the whistling roar of wind in his ears as the ground rushed up to meet him. The copy ninja landed lightly, almost soundlessly, his knees bending smoothly in a well-practiced motion to absorb the shock. Had that been all there was to it, his legs would have snapped under the force of his impact. Fortunately for him, his legs, and every other ninja who had performed a similar maneuver, his chakra was up to the task. If released properly and at the right moment, it served to both cushion the impact and reinforce his legs to stand the rigors of leaping off a branch that was 30 feet off the ground. Proper application of chakra, combined with a good landing posture, also helped him minimize the noise his landing made and kept his feet from making any deep impression on the soil. Team 7's Jounin-sensei retrieved his sleeping bag from its resting place in the hollow between 2 roots, near the rest of his field gear. He put his pack down, cleared a relatively flat piece of ground of rocks and other debris, and laid out his sleeping bag. Preparations complete, Kakashi approached Sakura and quietly nudged her awake. "Huh!" The girl groaned sleepily, sitting up. "It's your turn to keep watch," Kakashi explained, pitching his voice low to avoid waking the 2 boys slumbering nearby. Sakura extracted herself from her sleeping bag and staggered to her feet. She stood for a moment, rubbing the crust from her eyes. Kakashi made his way back to his sleeping bag and lay down. Within moments, exhaustion had pulled him into sleep's embrace. Sakura drowsily gathered her equipment. She hooked her kunai holster through the gauze wrap on her right leg, tightened the strap securely, and tied her equipment pouch to her waist. The kunoichi stood for a moment, her mind still not finished dragging itself out of sleep. A faint breeze blew through the trees, causing Sakura to shiver. She rubbed her arms with her hands, trying to force some warmth into her skin. Not for the first time, she regretted not being able to light a decent campfire. Day after day of cold food, usually field rations, was more than monotonous. It was torture on a budding kunoichi. At night, the lack of fire meant that she spent nearly every moment outside of her sleeping bag cold. Taki no Kuni was farther north than Konoha, and she could acutely feel the difference at night. Sakura sighed unhappily. She shook her head, trying to drive wistful thoughts of warm fires, hot baths, thick blankets, and Sasuke-kun, Shinaro, out of her head. Just concentrate on watch duty, she scolded herself. Boring, monotonous, miserable watch duty. Sakura sighed again. Team 7's kunoichi looked around for a comfortable spot with a good line of sight. A flash of white peeked out from the deep shadows, catching her gaze. The scroll in Kakashi-sensei's pack, she realized. A surge of curiosity rose within her. While she was desperately curious as to what Kakashi-sensei had learned, she knew that she needed to keep watch. Besides, if she waited a bit and let Kakashi-sensei slip deeper into sleep, she would have a better chance of sneaking a peek. Resigning herself to patience, Sakura settled for Kakashi-sensei's perch and leapt upward. As the minutes passed by, Sakura could feel her curiosity growing, gnawing at her resolve. With nothing to do but think and watch the still, dark scenery, her mind constantly returned to the contents of the mysterious scroll Kakashi had emerged from the general's tent with. Still, she forced herself to wait patiently, even though the minutes seemed to drag on forever. A half an hour passed before Sakura reached the limits of her patience. He's as asleep as he's going to get by now, she rationalized as she dropped down off the branch. Her heart pounded nervously as she stealthily crept her way to Kakashi-sensei's backpack. Kakashi-sensei may have been asleep, but it would not take much to wake him. Sakura didn't think that he would punish her harshly if he caught her reading the documents, but she couldn't be completely sure of that. Either way, she did not want to be caught. Despite her worries, she reached her objective without incident. Silently, carefully, she extracted her prize. Sakura held her breath, clutching the medium-sized scroll, and stayed absolutely still. When Kakashi-sensei didn't rise up, filled with righteous anger, and smite her, she smiled slightly in relief and retreated with her bounty. Unwittingly copying her sensei, Sakura returned to the high boughs of the tree she had picked out to serve as her vantage point. Unlike Kakashi-sensei, she didn't dare risk a light, and so had to make do with the snatches of silver moonlight that she could get. Luckily for her, the bulk of the clouds had passed and there was more uninterrupted moonlight to be had than there had been earlier in the night. Sakura still had to contend with leaves blocking the light, but they were much easier to deal with than clouds, and she did not have too much trouble finding a good spot to read in. Sakura carefully loosed the knot of steel wire that bound the scroll and opened it. The kunoichi scanned the scroll quickly, skimming through the haphazard collection of documents that had gone into its creation. After almost an hour of fruitless reading, Sakura was just about ready to scream in frustration. Most of it was too dry and technical for her to understand, and the few bits that weren't seemed to be scattered randomly throughout the scroll. In fact, the whole thing seemed to be a disorderly mess lacking any sense of rational organization whatsoever. She was just about to give up on the whole thing when a passage caught her eye. Sandwiched between a table of meaningless figures and abbreviations and a report on the latrine duty roster a week and a half ago was an order commanding some lieutenant to take a company of men and move a convey of supplies east to an undisclosed location, designated as Point 3. It was the vagueness of the order that caught her eye. If it wasn't important, wouldn't the orders have been clearer? Sakura reasoned. She might have ignored it anyway, but Naruto's success earlier in the day at locating General Takamasa's camp, upstaging both herself and Sasuke-kun in the process, was still fresh in her mind. Sakura smiled wryly, remembering Kakashi-sensei's words. Follow the food, huh? Sakura quickly rewrapped the scroll and tied it shut. This was important. A hidden base was exactly the kind of thing they were supposed to discover. But if she told Kakashi-sensei about it, she would have to admit that she had read the scroll. A worried frown crossed her face as she recalled Irika-sensei's lecture on information security. Sakura bit her lower lip, thinking hard. She remembered her earlier aggravation and saw Naruto's clenched fists and weary, disappointed eyes again in her mind's eye. Another image of Naruto, back when he had been more innocent and less experienced, came to mind. Sakura remembered Naruto with blood seeping out of his left hand, a kunai clenched tightly in his right, and a look of defiance and determination on his face. Her own dissatisfaction at constantly being relegated to a supporting role returned forcefully. Even if she told Kakashi-sensei about what she had discovered, he'd just tell her to stand guard while the others did the real work. She would just be pushed aside again. Sakura took a deep breath, her fists clenching. I'm stronger now, she thought unhappily, but Sasuke-kun still won't acknowledge my growth. I know it's not much, but still. Simmering beneath that was her irritation towards Kakashi-sensei. He never gives me a chance to do anything useful, Sakura frowned bitterly. During the mission to the wave, she hadn't been ready or capable to truly do anything against their opponents. Her failure then still burned. Even though no one had said anything, she knew her performance then had made an impression in Sasuke-kun's, and Kakashi-sensei's, mind. It had not been a good impression. But now things were different. Sakura wanted to prove herself to Sasuke-kun, to her teacher even. Even to Naruto, she admitted to herself. It was Naruto who had helped her train and pushed her so hard, even if it was just to keep up with him. In a way, it was because of Naruto that she had even started to take her training seriously in the first place. If she hadn't had that odd impulse to apologize to him, she would never have become embarrassed and unwittingly blurted something about training out in the first place. If she hadn't, she probably would have never started training herself in earnest. If she hadn't, she might still be the weak girl that Sasuke-kun had deservedly held in contempt. But I'm not that girl anymore. Sakura's back straightened. The idea that had been tickling the back of her mind bloomed. A plan formed. It didn't take her long to return the scroll to Kakashi-sensei's pack and arrange it to her satisfaction. Her task completed, her curiosity satisfied, Sakura crept away from her teacher. Quietly, she made her way over to Naruto's sleeping form. Sakura nudged him with her foot. When he didn't stir, she sighed and reached down to clap a hand over his mouth. With her other hand, she gave him a firm pinch to the cheek. The boy yelped, his eyes flying open. Fortunately, his cry had been quiet, and her hand had proven enough to muffle the noise. Sakura brought a finger up to her lips in a shushing gesture. Wide-eyed, Naruto nodded slowly. She released her hand. Sakura-chan. Naruto whispered quietly, bewildered. Get ready to move. Sakura whispered back. Naruto looked around at their sleeping teammates, and looked back at her, utterly lost. Sakura gave him a tight, almost savage, little grin. Kakashi-sensei and Sasuke-kun were both talented shinobi. Indeed, they were geniuses, prodigies that were hailed by the village for their skill and potential. Sakura and Naruto were inevitably left in the shadows that they cast. For a long time, Sakura had been content with that. Yet now, for some reason, the thought of being stuck behind her teammates, unacknowledged and thought of as useless, it made her stomach churn. If she wanted to be respected, if she wanted Sasuke-kun to look at her and Kakashi-sensei to trust her, she needed to go out and make it happen. It wouldn't come to her. Sakura needed to step forward. Naruto had already done so, and yet it hadn't changed much in the minds of Team 7's geniuses. Sakura knew it wouldn't be easy, and she knew it wouldn't be instant. But still, I want to move forward. I don't want to just look up at others for my whole life. I want to be looked up to. Sakura understood Naruto's frustration now. She understood it, she felt it, and now she would start fighting against it, just like Naruto did. Now they had a new mission. If Kakashi-sensei won't give Naruto and me a chance to prove ourselves, then we'll just have to take that chance for ourselves. The sound of the wind rushing past had built into a dull, constant roar. Naruto was beginning to feel the burn in his legs as he ran after Sakura through the hilly, temperate terrain of Taki no Kuni. Grass whispered as they passed, and occasionally a careless step brought the sharp exclamation of a twig snapping. Moonlight filtered through the canopy of the towering trees around them, lighting their way. Naruto nimbly hopped over a small, wayward boulder and wondered, not for the first time, just what Sakura-chan was thinking. She was acting very strangely. It wasn't like her to act rebellious, and going off alone to who knows where without Kakashi-sensei's approval definitely fell under that category. The strange eagerness she had displayed when she had told him what she was planning had struck him as, well, strange. Since when did Sakura-chan need to prove herself? Naruto wondered, paraphrasing Sakura's hurried explanation. Sneaking away from the team, going solo, or, in this case, duo, and infiltrating another military camp in search of information was a little bit above and beyond anything he had ever tried to do. He didn't think she had to go that far to prove her worth, not like him, but all of his arguments seemed to have gone in one ear and out of the other, that is, if they had went in at all. Besides, it was hard to argue and run at the same time. Sakura wasn't like him. She was not a talentless dropout. She had never faced the scorn, hatred, and neglect of an entire village. So why is Sakura-chan doing this? He had spent several minutes trying to wrap his mind around it, trying to find an explanation behind her sudden recklessness. But he could only come up with one. A surge of bitterness welled up within him as the conclusion he had been trying to avoid loomed large in his thoughts. Sasuke. Of course. It was always about Sasuke, wasn't it? Sakura-chan is doing all of this to try and get Sasuke to look at her. How could he not know? Her behavior was a mirror image of his, once upon a time, and perhaps it still was, even now. The circumstances were different, and their roles were reversed, but it was the same. Naruto understood exactly what was driving her. The pain and despair, the denial, the fragile, treasured hope that bloomed fierce and bright when a new path to her dreams seemed to open up, he understood very well. He also knew from dismal experience what would likely follow. Every time he had ran down that bright road, thinking this time, for sure, it had turned out to be a mirage. But he could not say it. Naruto tried, and found the words stifled in his throat. I can't do it. Even though he knew she would be hurt, even though he knew that it would not end well, he couldn't do it. Naruto couldn't step on her hope. Maybe it was just selfishness on his part. He didn't want her to blame him, and a small part of him hoped that she would learn better when she found out that it was all just an illusion. Nothing had ever stopped him from trying. His own doubts, the words of others, they were all so small compared to that wild surge of hope, to the looming shadow of the dream ahead, so close that it seemed like it could be touched. I can't stop her, but I can go with her and make sure she doesn't get hurt. Even he had never done something quite so dangerous while trying to draw her attention. He was not about to let his teammates get hurt again. He had failed dramatically in the wave. His heroic, stupid, in hindsight, entrance had made him look like an idiot and had nearly gotten him killed, and the rest of his attempt to save Sasuke hadn't fared any better. In the end, Sasuke had saved him. It had been one of the most humiliating moments of his life. After all of his boasts, all of his promises, and all of his hard work, he had once again been saved by Sasuke. He had been so weak, so pitiful, that his rival had stepped in front of Haku's attack to save him. When Sasuke had died, or at least had seemed to die, his humiliation had evolved into horror beyond anything he had ever known. It was the first time he had ever seen anyone die. The fact that it was his teammate that had been killed made it 100 times worse. No matter how small or bitter or envious Sasuke made him feel sometimes, the arrogant Uchiha was still his teammate. They were both Konoha shinobi, comrades in arms. Moreover, Sasuke was his rival and his goal. Naruto would never surpass Sasuke if the jackass died, after all. The dead couldn't be beaten, not by the living. At that moment, Sasuke might have even been his, sort of, friend. It had pretty much been one of the worst moments of his life. Perhaps it hadn't been as bad as it seemed, especially now that he knew Sasuke had lived through it, and it was largely overshadowed by the bloody events that had followed, but even so, Naruto was determined to never let his teammates down again. He would protect them with his life, even that idiot, Sasuke, and he was not about to let Sakura-chan put herself in harm's way alone. They had been running eastward and a bit south away from Taka-something's camp at a steady pace for at least an hour, according to Naruto's reckoning, when Sakura began to slow down. Naruto slowed down to match her speed. When she stopped completely, Naruto stopped beside her. "Sakura-chan?" The girl didn't look at him, her eyes roaming the nearby ground intently. "Sakura-chan?" Naruto asked again, a bit louder than before. "What?" Sakura asked distractedly. "Looking for the trail," she muttered. "What trail?" If anything, her answer left her even more bewildered. Sakura turned to stare at him with her patented, "What are you, stupid? Look! You haven't noticed the tracks we've been following ever since we skirted General Takamasa's camp?" she asked disbelievingly. Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly, feeling about 10 inches tall. "We've been following tracks?" he asked. Sakura rolled her eyes and turned her attention back to her search. Naruto frowned, cursing himself inwardly for his obliviousness. He hated it when he looked incompetent in front of others, and he hated it when he made a fool of himself in front of Sakura-chan most of all. Naruto resolved to redeem himself. The air whined as 10 Kage Bunshin appeared around Naruto. Sakura jerked her head back to stare at Naruto, startled by the noise and the sudden appearance of the clones. Naruto barked out a quick string of orders and the shadow clones sprinted off in different directions, searching for any signs of human passage. Naruto merely grinned when he saw that Sakura was looking at him. "Don't worry, Sakura-chan!" he exclaimed boisterously. "We'll find the tracks you're looking for." Sakura only nodded, smiling. If they did, it would save her the work. But she wasn't able to leave it up to Naruto. Sakura began moving forward again, her eyes scanning the surroundings. Naruto stared after her for a moment, nonplussed, before he realized that he was being left behind. "Wait up, Sakura-chan!" 5 minutes later, one of Naruto's clones came barreling through the trees. The clone spotted the convoluted mass of orange, yellow, pink, and red as he passed overhead and immediately adjusted his course to land back in front of them. "I found tracks, 20 meters that way," the Kage Bunshin explained excitedly, throwing an arm out to point in the indicated direction. Naruto grinned proudly. "Show us," he said grandly, feeling smug. One of his clones had found the tracks after all. His copy nodded and darted off the way it had come. Sakura ran after him. Naruto stood there for a moment, his arms folded, his head nodding in satisfaction. Several seconds passed before he realized that he was being left behind again. "Crap!" Naruto cursed, sprinting after Sakura. When he reached the clearing, he found his clone gesturing enthusiastically at the various signs of passage he had found. Sakura turned to face him as he ran up to her, nodding. "This is it." Naruto studied the tracks in the ground, seeing the faint grooves where wagons had passed, the hoof marks embedded in the dirt where horses or some other pack animals had passed, and the faint hints of boot prints. He tried to commit it to memory. "Now I know what to look for." Naruto looked up at Sakura. "Sakura-chan, what exactly are we doing?" She had given him a brief, rushed explanation before hustling him out of his sleeping bag, but it had left him with a lot of questions. Sakura hesitated, biting her lip. "I read Kakashi-sensei's scroll," Sakura admitted. Naruto's eyes widened for a moment. That sounded more like something he would do rather than Sakura-chan. He grinned. "Really?" he asked excitedly. What did it say? Most of it was worthless, she said dismissively, dimming Naruto's excitement. But I did find a lead. General Takamasa sent a convoy of supplies to a place he called Point 3, and the orders were extremely vague. I could only find out that they went east, and that they left through the south entrance of the camp. That's why we went back there, Naruto muttered, nodding sagely as if he had known that all along. Right, Sakura agreed, humoring him. So we're going to find this Point 3 place? Sakura nodded eagerly. We didn't find anything out about their plans or any really detailed information about the situation in General Takamasa's tent, but if Point 3 really is a classified outpost of some sort, it might have more stuff about their plans. Naruto completed her sentence. Exactly. But, he trailed off, frowning thoughtfully. What? Sakura asked anxiously. Why are we doing this? Naruto wondered aloud. Shouldn't we have waited till tomorrow and told Kakashi-sensei? No, Sakura said quickly. But… Naruto, Sakura began earnestly. Don't you think Kakashi-sensei doesn't trust us? Naruto blinked, startled. What do you mean? He asked uncertainly. Think about it, she urged. Aren't we always being treated like little kids? She asked, conveniently ignoring the fact that they were little kids. We always have to play support roles. In training, he always focuses on our faults, she pointed out. They both knew that it wasn't entirely unjustified, but that didn't lessen the sting. Besides, he hardly did anything to really help them correct their weaknesses. Yeah, Naruto agreed uncertainly, feeling a flicker of irritation at Kakashi-sensei rising within him. But still, he remembered the trust Kakashi-sensei had shown him after the battle on the bridge. Sakura took a deep breath. She didn't want to do it, but she knew that she was out of options. She went for the kill. Kakashi-sensei trusts Sasuke-kun to do things well all of the time, Sakura murmured. Naruto stiffened. That's… Don't you want to show them that we can do just as well? Sakura prompted. Naruto's fists clenched. In a flash, memories of Kakashi-sensei comparing him to Sasuke tumbled through his mind. Every time Kakashi-sensei picked Sasuke to carry out an important task, every time Kakashi-sensei took Sasuke aside to give him tips or help him train, every time he… Naruto took a deep, calming breath. What would it be like, he wondered, to be held up against Sasuke's example and not be found wanting for once? Naruto met Sakura's eyes, seeing the determination within them. I've never seen her like this before, he mused. It felt sort of strange, seeing Sakura-chan so determined about something other than Sasuke. He nodded slowly. Okay, he assented. Sakura beamed. Great! She exclaimed, hiding her relief. For a moment, she had feared that Naruto wouldn't follow her. But it seemed like she could still rely on him when it really counted. Let's go! When? Sasuke woke to the sound of a quiet but intense discussion. He blinked, forcing his heavy, sleep-crusted eyelids to move despite their reluctance. They passed the perimeter almost 2 hours ago, a deep, unfamiliar voice replied. Sasuke began to sit up. His muscles protested, stiff from sleeping on the hard ground. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Kakashi's voice asked, exasperated. I assumed you already knew, replied the other voice. Sasuke could practically see the shrug that accompanied the statement. They are your students, after all. Kakashi sighed heavily. Find their trail and follow it, he ordered. The deep baritone grunted affirmatively, and the owner disappeared before Sasuke could get a good look at whoever Kakashi had been talking to. Sasuke's teacher rose to his feet and briskly began donning his equipment. Kakashi, Sasuke called, his voice still somewhat hoarse from sleep. He cleared his throat. The silver-haired Jounin looked towards Sasuke. You're up, Kakashi observed, not stopping his preparations. What's going on? I'd like to know that myself, the older man replied. After a pause, he continued. Naruto and Sakura are gone. Sasuke stared. Did the man think he was an idiot? He had noticed at the moment he had awoken. And? I don't know where they went or why, Kakashi replied briskly, slipping his pack over his shoulders. So I'm going after them. Sasuke stood. Then I'll… Stay here, Kakashi interrupted. Sasuke scowled. Why? He demanded. You won't be able to keep up, Kakashi replied bluntly. It's better that you stay here. The young Uchiha's jaw clenched tightly as he glared at Kakashi. The Jounin met his gaze unflinchingly, and it was Sasuke who looked away first. Fine, he bit out. Don't do anything stupid, Kakashi cautioned. Sasuke scoffed, still angry at his teacher for the implication that he was deficient in some way. "I'm not like those two," he replied coldly. Silence was his only reply. Sasuke turned his head back towards Kakashi, but the Jounin was already gone. Point 3, Sakura and Naruto came to discover, was disturbingly close to the border of Fire Country. The mysterious outpost turned out to be a small camp, nestled deep in a dense wood of towering redwoods growing in a small valley between a network of rolling hills. A creek sliced through the hills and ran through the center of the woods. After marking the location on her map, Sakura had noted that they were less than 2 kilometers from the great river that carved out Hai no Kuni's northern border. The ethereal crescent that was the moon cast the valley below them in dim silver light. It hung low in the western sky. Sakura cast a worried glance at it. "We don't have that much time left. Sakura-chan." Startled, Sakura turned to look at Naruto. The blonde boy looked strangely serious. It was sort of unsettling to see Naruto look like that. She never had any good memories of Naruto wearing that expression. Of course, she didn't have any good memories of Naruto, the nuisance that he was, but still. Sakura felt goosebumps on her arms that had nothing to do with the chill breeze. "Nothing's going to go wrong," she told herself reassuringly. "Yes?" she asked. "The watch is changing." He nodded towards the camp. "If we're going, we should move now." Sakura stared at him, amazed. "Is this really Naruto?" Sakura wondered. Since when did Naruto think about things like the best time to slip through an enemy's security? "Sakura-chan," Naruto said again, more urgently this time. The kunoichi snapped out of her musings. "Right," she replied, adrenaline beginning to course through her bloodstream. Sakura nodded to Naruto. "Let's go." Quickly, silently, they slipped through the shadows, darting from cover to cover as they made their way down the gently sloped hill they had chosen to make their approach from. Despite the color of their clothing, they were trained shinobi. To any non-shinobi, their ability to use the environment, lighting, and subtle distractions to conceal themselves would seem nearly supernatural, if they were noticed at all. Naruto and Sakura may have been rookie genin, and their clothes weren't considered stealthy by conventional wisdom, but unless they made a mistake it would have been extremely difficult for the soldiers of Taki no Kuni to spot their approach. "Dear Hikari, are you doing well? How is your health? Thank you for your last letter." "I am doing well. I have gotten a new posting that." Katsuo hummed thoughtfully, lightly tapping the pen against his lower lip. He closed his eyes, the sounds of the slowly waking forest and the burbling creek next to him filling his ears. Dawn had broken not a half-hour past, but the sun had yet to peek over the canopies of the massive trees soaring skyward around him, leaving the camp submerged in the eerie pre-dawn twilight. "I'm not supposed to say too much," he thought to himself. He didn't want his letter call attention from the censors. "I have been promoted and transferred to a new company, and the pay is much better. I am sending some money back with this letter. Please use it to buy your medicine." The young soldier nodded, satisfied. It was true, and it gave nothing away. For a moment, his expression tightened sorrowfully at the thought of his little sister. She was the reason that he had enlisted in the first place. The life of a thief was too dangerous and unpredictable for him to properly care for his sister. But he had had few other options. Few were willing to give work to a young orphan, much less one that was whispered to be a thief, in the small port town of Mikan, which was located on the cold, damp northern coasts of Taki no Kuni. Once he had discovered that she was terminally ill with some disease the doctor had called wasting lung, he had desperately sought to gather enough money to pay for treatment. The money he made from stealing hadn't been enough, and in any case his income wasn't steady. His search for work had been full of failures and disappointments. He simply didn't have the skills to win and hold a steady job in the face of competition, most of whom were willing to work for less than he was. Eventually, Katsuo had found his way into the army. They were more than willing to take him on, and Katsuo was willing to join in return for steady pay. It had meant leaving Hikari-chan. Katsuo would never have done it if he had not been desperate, and he knew that the local orphanage, run by a stern, matronly grandmother named Haruko, would take Hikari in. It was Katsuo she had had a problem with, and with him leaving. Eventually, his skills at sneaking around and his deft touch with a knife had caught the attention of the higher-ups. He had been promoted and transferred to the 9th Company, which he soon learned performed clandestine operations. Despite his worries, Katsuo and the men in his immediate unit had yet to be called on to do anything truly dangerous or dirty. Still, he was uneasy about sitting so close to the border with Fire Country. Katsuo had no idea what was going on or why they were there, but he had a feeling that it could become very messy for them if things went wrong. But the pay was good. He had no complaints about that, and if things went well it wouldn't be long before he could gather enough money to send Hikari to see a good doctor in the capital, or maybe even a medical nin. "Hope you are well," and tell Haruko Bazin, thank you for me, even if she is a crusty old bitch. Katsuo considered that last line for a moment before scratching it out. Hikari-chan wouldn't be amused. She was a gentle girl, and she always scolded him when he insulted or made fun of others. Take care of yourself. I will see you soon, and we will go fishing together on the rocks again. A rustling noise caught Katsuo's attention. Shit! Katsuo swore inwardly. I'm supposed to be on watch. If that's Sergeant Goro. He shivered with dread. But it wasn't his demonic sergeant. Two forms emerged from the shadows, following the creek away from the camp. Katsuo squinted, barely making out their worn uniforms in the dark. Are they new? Katsuo wondered. I've never seen them before. But something in the way the pair moved caused Katsuo to reconsider. Greenies didn't move so quietly. These two had clearly been in the Special Operations Division for longer than Katsuo had. Still, they weren't his sergeant, nor did they seem to be officers. Katsuo quickly put his pen to paper to finish his letter before the other soldiers approached close enough to read it and see all of the sentimental things he had written to Hikari. Feel better soon. I will come home to visit as soon as possible. Love. Katsuo. He stood, stuffing the letter into his right pocket. Good, morning. Katsuo greeted formally, just in case they really were his superiors. They still hadn't emerged completely into the light of the dying fire behind him, so he couldn't make out too many details of their appearances. Good morning. The one to his right, the closest to the creek, replied. Hi. The one to his left greeted casually. Silence yawned, broken only by the sounds of nature whispering around them. Are you new here? Katsuo asked hesitantly, breaking the silence. I don't think I've ever seen you around. We just got in. The one on the left said, sounding almost amused. Katsuo frowned. There was a grunt as the other soldier elbowed his comrade. We were transferred here recently. The one on the right corrected. I see. There was something very strange about the pair, about the whole encounter. Katsuo felt his uneasiness growing. A gust of wind rustled countless leaves as it flowed over the woods. For a moment, a stray ray of sunlight shone down on the strange pair, revealing two nondescript soldiers. One was tall and stocky, the other was slender and vaguely feminine-looking. Both were taller than Katsuo, and he wasn't short, but other than that they looked fairly ordinary. The slender one on the right was holding a tightly bound parcel. They looked kind of like documents? Katsuo wondered. Suddenly suspicious, Katsuo frowned and lightly touched the wakizashi at his hip. Do you have identification? He asked, pitching his voice in his best imitation of the demon, Goro. They looked at each other. Finally, the one on the left shrugged and spread his hands apart. Instinctively, Katsuo thumbed the guard of his wakizashi, freeing the blade. Then everything went wrong. The brown parcel was launched into the air. An instant later, the feminine impostor was upon him. Katsuo instinctively stepped back and to the side, hoping to enter at an angle and counterattack. His wakizashi flashed out of its sheath almost as if it were alive, a shark smelling blood. It sliced harmlessly through air. Katsuo gaped even as his body instinctively followed through with the slash. Where did he go? Katsuo wondered frantically, panic setting in. The world darkened. Katsuo looked up, terrified. A sandaled foot hung above him, and suddenly it was as big as the sky. Naruto winced at the wet crunch of the young sentry's nose caving and reached his ears. There was a poof and a cloud of smoke as Sakura-chan's henge was broken. The soldier staggered back, clutching his bloody, broken nose. He moaned and collapsed to his knees. Naruto waited nervously for the kunoichi to take action as the soldier looked up, freezing in surprise at the sight of a young pink-haired girl. Abruptly, Sakura was in his face again. Naruto's blood seemed to freeze in his veins as he followed the sentry's gaze to Sakura's forehead. Sakura-chan sitaight, he thought numbly. Somehow during their infiltration of the hidden camp or during their quiet escape, the sooty layer concealing her allegiances had been washed or wiped off. The soldier's mouth opened, working silently. Ko. Sakura raised a fist to deliver the knockout blow. No. The soldier's eyes slid shut. Sakura's hand blurred. Ha! Naruto watched the soldier slump to the ground, unconscious. He couldn't muster so much as a response as Sakura-chan turned to him and smiled, happy to have kept the sentry from alerting the camp to their presence. Limply, he allowed her to take the documents that he had caught from her earlier toss back. To prepare for war. Sakura-chan said something. He knew she had since he saw her mouth move. But for Naruto, the outside world had gone silent. Every heartbeat boomed like thunder in his ears. It almost seemed like he could hear his blood flowing through his veins. International incident. Things had gone so well. Naruto had dared to hope that they would actually pull it off. They had slipped into the camp without any trouble, and a combination of stealth, the clever application of henge, and a healthy dash of luck had carried them through to the commander's tent. There had been a virtual treasure trove of information. There hadn't really been time to sort through it all, but their hurried inspection had revealed dispatches from various generals, coded communications between initials, and even a sheaf of letters from the daimyo himself. He accepts all of Konoha's burdens and takes responsibility for everything. Hokage. Sacrifice. He had decided that one meant the other. To be Hokage was to sacrifice yourself for the sake of Konoha, for the will of fire. Part of that meant accepting the responsibility, and the blame, for Konoha shinobi. Sakura-chan. Naruto closed his eyes tightly, his hands balling into fists. His nails dug deep into his palms. Naruto, if you get caught, if any of us gets found out by someone. Sakura-chan's worried voice forced Naruto to open his eyes. His fists uncurled, his muscles relaxed, and tension flowed out of him. Naruto smiled. Silence them. I'm okay, Sakura-chan. Naruto reassured the girl cheerfully. Are you sure? Sakura gave Naruto a worried look. It wasn't like him to space out so completely, and for a second the expression on his face had scared her. I'm fine, Naruto repeated. Sakura nodded reluctantly, accepting his reassurances. Let's go then, she said, turning to leave. Naruto didn't follow her. She turned quizzically. Naruto? Naruto's smile hadn't wavered. You go on ahead, Sakura-chan. What? She asked, startled. Why? Just go, he urged. Sakura frowned. I'm not going to leave you here. I have to take a piss, Naruto blurted. What? Sakura recoiled. That's. You. Don't be so. Ugh. Sakura shook her head, disgusted. Can't you hold it? She demanded finally, flustered. But Sakura-chan. Naruto whined, pressing his knees together. The way her face scrunched up might have seemed funny, in some other time. Somehow, Naruto didn't think he'd ever laugh again. I really need to go, Naruto pleaded, pitching his voice higher than usual. Grass rustled as Sakura turned sharply on her heel, rolling her eyes and snorting as she did so. Honestly, Sakura thought uncharitably with patented female scorn. Only Naruto would decide to use the bathroom so close to an enemy camp. A faint embarrassed blush stained her cheeks. I don't know why I put up with him. Fine, Sakura sighed. She looked back at him. But hurry up! If you don't catch up in 5 minutes, I'm leaving you behind, she warned. An instant later she was gone. Naruto's smile faded. The genin made his way to the unconscious soldier. Naruto stood above him, hesitating. If I leave him here, they'll find his body soon, Naruto thought grimly. Kakashi had been very clear after their raid on General Takamasa's camp about minimizing the evidence of their presence. I have to make him disappear, Naruto concluded. Getting a firm grip on the guard, Naruto dragged him over to the bank of the creek. Good thing we're downstream from the camp, he muttered. He didn't want to leave a lot of blood staining the ground for someone to find. Moving quickly, Naruto gathered a pile of small rocks and began to stuff the soldier's pockets and jacket with the makeshift weights. He paused as a slip of paper fell out of one of the man's pockets. It floated in the air in an exaggerated zigzag pattern, finally coming to rest on the wild green grass that grew near the creek. After a moment, Naruto shrugged, putting it out of his mind. Naruto grunted as he picked the soldier up fully. A foot lightly tested the gentle current of the stream. Naruto stepped forward confidently and walked out to the center of the creek. Clear water flowed beneath his feet. Gentle dawn rays cast long shadows around him. The woods were coming alive with morning birdsong. Naruto looked down. It's dark, he noted clinically, nodding. It was deep enough to hide the body for a while, and the gentle current would keep the body moving away from the camp without throwing it up on the banks. Naruto stared at the bloody, broken face of the luckless sentry. Don't think, he ordered himself savagely. If this man survived, Konoha would be plunged into war, and it would be Sakura-chan's fault. It would be his fault too, for not taking responsibility, and dealing with her mess so that it didn't come back to hurt her or the village. Wasn't that what the Hokage did? A shiver worked its way through his body. Damn it. Why had he been so stupid? From the beginning, he had had his misgivings. Why hadn't he made her wait until Team 7 could investigate as a whole unit? Individual actions that disrupt teamwork will put your comrades in danger, or even get them killed. Those had been Kakashi-sensei's words. Teamwork. Naruto grimaced. Either way, he was caught in the vice of Kakashi-sensei's teachings. Going off on their own had not been good teamwork. But he couldn't abandon Sakura-chan either, that would have been even worse. In the ninja world, those who break the rules are scum. But those who abandon their comrades are even worse scum, right? Naruto sighed. Metal clinked faintly as Naruto reached back and removed a kunai from his equipment pouch. Holding the man up with one arm, Naruto considered the kunai clenched in his right hand. He didn't want to see blood again, didn't want to feel it splash across his hands or stain its scent into him. Didn't he already have enough nightmares? I could just drop him, Naruto reasoned. He'll drown, and it'll be over. Naruto, if you're going to do something, do it with everything you've got. Don't do things halfway. Iruka-sensei's voice whispered from the depths of his mind. Iruka-sensei had been trying to convince him to study more and stop skipping classes, but it had been one of the first times anyone had ever given him fatherly advice. Naruto still treasured those words. He chuckled miserably. I never thought that Iruka-sensei's words would come back to haunt me, especially not at a time like this. Iruka-sensei was right. Naruto had to make sure. He couldn't leave it to the river. But still he hesitated. Haku, what would she think? Naruto wondered. He closed his eyes, trying to imagine her response. Do what you think is best, Naruto-sama. Naruto opened his eyes, breathing hard. Shit. A flock of birds noisily took flight, searching for their first meal of the day. Threads of crimson slowly wound their way through the clear, shimmering water. There was a splash, and the waters ran red. Sakura leapt into the trees, leaving Naruto behind without a backward glance. She jumped from branch to branch, her mouth stretched into an elated grin. Not even Naruto's crude words had dampened her spirits. Everything had gone as planned, well, almost everything. It went better than I planned, Sakura thought smugly, her grin widening. Their infiltration had gone smoothly. The dawn may have threatened to illuminate the camp, but for a short time it had cast long shadows. They had slipped through the perimeter easily enough, and a combination of henge and good old-fashioned stealth had carried them through the rest of the camp. Naruto had proven surprisingly reliable. Well, she'd had to remind him to get rid of his stupid whisker marks, but other than that he had done pretty well. Their experience in raiding Takamasa's camp, and a bit of luck, had helped them locate the commander's tent quickly. It had been a struggle to decide what to take, but Naruto had solved that quickly enough by just grabbing everything he could lay his hands on. Sakura was still surprised that they had been able to fit it all in the envelope they had liberated, even as big as it was. By the time they had snuck out of the commander's tent, the sun had begun climbing the sky in earnest. By mutual agreement, they had decided to trust their henge disguises and acting ability to get them out of the camp. It would have worked too, if Naruto hadn't goofed off, Sakura thought indignantly. Her indignation did not last for long. She had handled it. She had saved the day, so to speak. Sakura had saved the day, not Sasuke-kun, not Kakashi-sensei, not even Naruto. She had done it. Sakura had found the secret encampment, infiltrated it, retrieved valuable information, and gotten out, all without being discovered. Admittedly, Naruto had helped, but it had been her operation. Kakashi-sensei would have to admit that her plan had worked brilliantly. Their execution of the mission had been nearly flawless, and Sakura felt charitable enough to let Naruto's mistakes slide. The fight flashed through her mind again. She remembered Naruto's helpless shrug as the guard had demanded to see identification. If Naruto had helped her stall for more time, she could have come up with something to tell the soldier, but instead the guard had drawn his short sword. Time had slowed down. She had felt herself moving even before the soft sigh of steel had reached her ears. She had thrown their precious cargo to Naruto even as her eyes had caught the glint of steel, and then. Sakura still wasn't sure why she had moved so quickly. Perhaps it had been the adrenaline. Perhaps she had still felt the desire to prove herself. The soldier's moves had been so obvious to her. It was as if he had been moving in slow motion. In some ways he had been. She had never really fought against anyone who wasn't a ninja before. Her opponent had not had the reflexes that came from years of shinobi training. He had lacked the chakra training that allowed shinobi to perform superhuman feats. That was probably why he had not thought to look up until too late. She had jumped to avoid his painfully slow opening attack, and her first kick had shattered his nose and sealed her victory. Her follow-up punch had knocked the hapless soldier out, and the matter had been closed. Naruto's mistake had been corrected and their escape route was clear. Her performance had been flawless, one that even Sasuke-kun would envy. When she told him about it, he would be so jealous that he hadn't come with them. Surely Sasuke-kun would beg her to take him with her next time, and then. Sakura giggled, blushing. He would have to admit that she was stronger. Finally, Sasuke-kun would see that she was strong enough to stand beside him. Shinaro. Sakura's silly grin faded a bit as she came to a stop on the next large branch in her path, still high amidst the trees. Now isn't the time, she scolded herself half-heartedly. They still had to get back to camp. Once they got back, she could describe her great adventures to her heart's content, and she wouldn't even have to tell Kakashi-sensei that she had snuck a glance at his scroll. Instead, Sakura would explain that she had remembered seeing the dirt track heading out of Takamasa's camp and had decided to scout it. Yeah. All they had to do was get back to camp, preferably before Kakashi-sensei woke up, and where the hell was Naruto, and what was taking him so damned long? If he's goofing off again, I'm going to kill him, Sakura thought angrily. It had been more than 5 minutes since she had left him, closer to 10, actually. The kunoichi huffed in irritation, deciding that she had waited long enough. She turned around and made her way back through the brush, intent on finding Naruto and giving him a piece of her mind. It took her about 5 minutes to make her way back to where she had left Naruto. Sakura nimbly leapt out of the trees, landing softly on the woodland soil. Naruto stood at the bank of the creek, staring intently at the worn, crinkled piece of paper clutched between his hands. She absently noted that he had released his hinge. Sakura sucked in a deep breath, ready to yell at him, before noticing how pale he was. His hands are shaking, Sakura noted worriedly. Naruto's mouth was moving, soundlessly forming words that only he could hear. Bright, wet lines sliced down his cheeks, drawing attention to his whisker-like marks. Naruto? Sakura asked timidly, her voice soft. Are you okay? We should get. She trailed off, her eyes widening. Blood, she whispered. There were small spots of blood on the paper Naruto was holding. Dark stains stood out starkly on the cuffs and torso of his jacket. Naruto's hands were clean but wet, Sakura realized. As if he had washed his hands. Naruto! Sakura said urgently, still not understanding. But he was uninjured. Naruto didn't respond, didn't seem to hear her, and his dumbstruck look remained fixed. Her stomach nodded in suspicion. No. Sakura looked around frantically, but the unconscious body of the sentry was gone. I just knocked him out, Sakura thought numbly. He can't have gotten up yet, he just. Blood was seeping into Naruto's clothes, the body was gone, and everything was wrong. Abruptly, the forest was gone, the camp was gone, and there was only Naruto. There was only Naruto, with blood dripping from his hands and hollow, terrible red eyes, standing tall on the bridge amidst the corpses of mercenaries. Palm met face with bruising force. Naruto staggered, situational awareness and rational thought surging back into his mind like an incoming Arctic tide. Naruto looked up from the bloodied letter in his hand. Sakura-chan, he whispered hoarsely. Disbelief, confusion, and anger warred for control of her suddenly pale features. Another slap hammered into his unmolested cheek. Why? She tried to scream, but it came out as a half-broken whisper that hurt Naruto far worse than any slap. Naruto said nothing. There was nothing he could say. He had taken the burden from her unknowing shoulders, and now it was his to bear. Even if she hated him, he would protect her. It was a promise. Monster! For an instant, Naruto feared he would break. His heart crumpled in his chest. But he had done what had to be done. I'm sorry, he whispered brokenly through his swollen jaw, his final farewell to the hapless guard, to Katsuo. You're sorry? Sakura growled. Something inside of her snapped. Disbelief gave way to hot, unforgiving rage. A horn blew, low and mournful. Distant shouts washed over them. Naruto's mind cleared instantly, an icy calm settling over him. His hands, washed clean but somehow still bloody, Sakura, Katsuo, they didn't matter anymore. They were still in danger. Naruto roughly intercepted Sakura's incoming slap, gripped her forearm tightly, and dragged her back into the trees, away from the hornet's nest they had stirred up. Day dawned in a gentle wave of pink and gold clouds. Landscape blurred into a mess of indistinguishable colors, and the sounds of the waking woods were drowned out by the howling wind. Kakashi followed the scents of his two wayward students at a breakneck pace. Canine howls occasionally pierced through the dull roar of wind in his ears. Kakashi adjusted his course accordingly, following the lead of his wide-ranging nin dogs. He broke through the end of that particular patch of trees, landing smoothly on the grass and continuing his pursuit without losing any momentum. He caught sight of Naruto and Sakura a minute later, headed almost straight towards him. Kakashi slowed his pace and eventually came to a stop. They're okay, he thought, relieved. Team 7's Jounin-sensei set his face into a stern frown that his mask did nothing to soften and drew himself up to his full height, folding his arms, the very picture of displeasure. They caught sight of him and changed their course to meet him. Kakashi's eyes narrowed as Naruto and Sakura drew nearer. That's blood, he observed, spotting the stains on Naruto's clothes. For an instant he feared that one of them was injured. After a moment he ruled that out. They're not wounded. It's not their blood. His students came to a stop in front of him. Kakashi said nothing, content to stare at them. Sakura soon began fidgeting, unable to meet his disappointed gaze. Naruto stood still, his expression strangely flat. Kakashi felt a sliver of concern work through him again. It wasn't like Naruto at all. He glanced at the bloodstains again. Naruto. Report, Kakashi snapped. Sakura opened her mouth, but no words were forthcoming. She worried at her lower lip with her teeth. The girl was clearly thinking. Kakashi-sensei, I. Not you, Kakashi interrupted Naruto harshly. Sakura, report. Sakura hesitated. Kakashi focused on his anger and directed a sharp spike of killing intent towards the girl, in no mood to listen to her excuses. Green eyes widened, and Sakura could not contain the fearful gasp that escaped her. Her limbs quivered as her instincts screamed furiously at her to rent or hide, to get away from the predator in human form standing before her. It was gone as quickly as it had appeared. Sakura slumped, tears welling in her eyes. Sakura, Kakashi repeated more gently, but with a firm note of command underlying his words. Report. Words tumbled out of Sakura. There were no more delusions of lying to Kakashi-sensei, even by omission. And then I came back to find Naruto covered in blood and the body was gone, Sakura said dully. For an instant, fire sparked in her eyes as she turned to give her blonde teammate a venomous glance. There was an alarm from the camp after that, so we ran. She continued. After a while, we met you here. Kakashi rubbed his temples, feeling the hints of a headache forming. Naruto? He prompted. Your report? The Jounin grimaced as he listened to Naruto's report. It collaborated with Sakura's version of events for the most part. This isn't good, he thought, looking at the boy's flat expression. He's repressing his emotions again, perhaps even more than last time. Knock the guard out. I convinced her to leave so that I could finish him off, Naruto said, his voice a dull monotone as he discussed killing a man in cold blood. Kakashi saw Sakura's fists tighten, saw the flash of revulsion and anger cross her face, and sighed. Why did you kill the guard? Kakashi asked severely, preempting Sakura's explosion. Naruto looked him squarely in the face. You told me that if anyone discovered us, we needed to silence them, Naruto answered, a hint of anger in his voice. Sakura's eyes widened as she rounded on Kakashi. What? Kakashi nodded. You did well, he told Naruto gravely. Kakashi-sensei. Sakura, what do you think would happen if we were discovered stealing military information from Taki no Kuni? She faltered. At best, it would cause a diplomatic incident and the souring of relations between Waterfall and Fire Country. Trade would break down, and the economy would suffer. More likely, it would cause open hostility, probably even war, Kakashi said bluntly. But you didn't think about that, did you? Kakashi interrupted. Sakura flinched. Sakura, what were you thinking? He sighed. I wanted. Her voice trembled. I just wanted to show you that we were capable of doing things. Sakura trailed off. I wanted you to trust my abilities, she admitted softly. Kakashi stared at her. That's what this was about. His students had very nearly gotten themselves killed and created an international incident on some sort of attention-seeking whim? Kakashi forced himself to count to 10, keeping a hold on his temper. It's partly my fault, he admitted. I should have paid more attention to her and Naruto. If I had, this wouldn't have happened. Still, it was the height of stupidity on her part, on both their parts, since Naruto had docilely gone along with her plan. Do you remember what I said about teamwork? Kakashi asked quietly. They both nodded, Sakura hesitantly, Naruto sharply. Individual actions put the team in danger, and can lead to you and your comrades getting hurt or even killed. Your actions not only put yourselves in danger, it also put the whole team in danger, Kakashi said sternly. But, Sakura protested. You abandoned your watch, he continued. What if an enemy had snuck into our camp while Sasuke and I were sleeping? The blood drained from Sakura's face. On top of that, you recklessly went off on your own into enemy territory, risking not just yourselves but all of Konoha with your actions. Did you think about all of the Konohanin that might have died if you had gotten caught and started a war? Sakura shook her head mutely, her lip trembling. Tears quivered precariously in her eyes. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto protested at the sight of Sakura's tears. Kakashi leveled a glare at Naruto, causing the boy to flinch. And you? Why didn't you stop Sakura in the first place? Naruto's shoulders dropped. Well? I don't know, he muttered sullenly. Sakura-chan's arguments had ignited his fierce desire to surpass Sasuke, and he had agreed to follow her plans because of it. It seemed so petty and stupid, in hindsight. But I couldn't just let her go alone either. No, Kakashi agreed. But you shouldn't have let her go at all. Naruto dropped his eyes, his shoulders hunching. I know. Closing his eyes, Kakashi took a deep breath. He opened his eyes and exhaled noisily, looking down at Sakura's tear-streaked face, at Naruto's hollow, regretful eyes and blood-stained jacket. Where are the documents you retrieved? He asked briskly. Sakura wordlessly handed him a large envelope stuffed with papers. Kakashi quickly opened the flap and skimmed the documents, his eyes widening. This is... A wry smile touched his lips. The whole morning had seemed like an unmitigated disaster, but somehow his idiot students had managed to get their hands on the information they needed to finish the mission. Hokage-sama should be satisfied with this, Kakashi thought. Kakashi looked up at the bright, steadily climbing sun. It's time to leave. We'll talk about this later, he said crisply. We need to get moving. A deep chuckle sounded from a boulder as it watched the 3 distant Konoha shinobi depart, disappearing into the trees. The copy ninja, it mused. Isn't that interesting? There was a noise like mud churning. A brown, dripping mass slowly emerged from the pale limestone of the boulder. Mud drooled to the ground, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered man with dusky red-brown skin. Konoha must be worried to send him on such a trivial errand. He chuckled. Soil liquefied beneath his feet. Slowly, the muscular shinobi began to sink into the ground. 1,000 birds exploded into song. Turning, the last thing he saw was white death and a swirling red eye. Hatake Kakashi stared down at the dead ninja, absently shaking the excess blood off of his hand. That is interesting. He parroted his victim, taking note of the headband. Iwa, huh? Hokage-sama will certainly be interested in this. Smoke exploded. When it cleared, Kakashi was gone. Sweat trickled down his brow. It's hot, Konohamaru whined. Maybe it hadn't been such a good idea to cut class. At least the academy had air conditioning. For a moment, he considered going back and enduring Irika-sensei's scolding. No, Konohamaru vehemently shook his head. I have to do this, he declared, if only to himself. Naruto Naiken's been gone too much lately, Konohamaru thought unhappily. I'll show him that it's not smart to leave his place for so long. The Sandaime Hokage's grandson giggled, chuckled, he would insist, had Moegi or Udan been around to bring the matter up, and rubbed his hands together deviously. The movement nearly unbalanced him from his perch on the ledge just below Naruto's balcony. Nervously, he pressed himself firmly back against the wall. He still wasn't good enough to blunt a fall from anything higher than 10 feet. Once he felt secure in the fact that he wasn't about to topple off the side of the building, Konohamaru took a deep breath, slipped on his makeshift prank pack, and reached for the pipes that ran up the side of the building. Climbing the 10 feet or so that remained up to Naruto Naiken's balcony was a harrowing and difficult feat, but Konohamaru managed. Konohamaru was sweating heavily by the time he swung his way over the guardrail of Naruto's balcony. For a moment he stood, panting furiously, trying to suck in air, savoring his victory over the daunting building. Finally he straightened and glanced around nervously. No one appeared to interfere with his task. Konohamaru made his way to the door and reached for the handle. Huh. That's odd. He brought another hand up and braced his legs. The young ninja in training grunted with exertion. It's locked, he muttered. His eyes widened. Of course it's locked. I'm such an idiot. In truth, he hadn't even thought about what would happen once he reached the balcony. He went over to a nearby window and tested it, only to find it also locked. A soothing breeze ruffled his hair for an all-too-brief moment. It was quickly gone, leaving only oppressive heat in its wake. Konohamaru looked around frantically for some way to get in. There was no way he could break the glass. He wanted to prank Naruto Naiken, not completely vandalize his place. Was this the end of his quest? Konohamaru peered through the glass, trying to see if there was some other way to get into his leader's apartment. Absently, he rubbed his damp palms against his pants, squinting as he tried to make out the interior of the apartment through the sun's glare reflecting off the warm glass. He could vaguely make out the details of the Naruto Naiken's room. There was a pin-up girl calendar hanging on the opposite wall, a few worn posters, a small, meticulously made-up double bed, and a weathered wooden nightstand. A single picture frame accompanied the alarm clock on the nightstand. Several potted plants dotted the room, with a large fern taking a place of honor on the right of the bed. But there were no hints on how to get in. He moved on to the other end of the balcony. There was a second sliding glass window, much like the one looking into the bedroom. Konohamaru looked inside to see what looked like a small living room with a table and 4 battered chairs. Past that, Konohamaru could make out Naruto's dingy kitchen and the foyer. Raising a hand up to block the sun from his eyes, Konohamaru squinted and brought his face closer to the glass. "What is that?" Abruptly, Konohamaru gasped in surprise and ducked below the windowsill. "There's someone in there," Konohamaru thought excitedly. Was it a burglar? One of Naruto Niken's old enemies, come to take revenge? A long-lost family member? His mind whirled as his imagination feverishly conjured possible scenarios. Sarutobi's grandson cautiously raised his head up to peek inside. "Haku-nichan?" Konohamaru mumbled, disappointed. After a moment, he sighed unhappily. If Haku-nichan was there, he would have no choice but to withdraw. He conveniently ignored the fact that he still hadn't figured out how to get inside. "But what is she doing here?" he wondered. Haku was sitting at the small, square wooden table, her elbows on the white tablecloth, her chin supported by her palms. Konohamaru thought that he saw her smiling, but that didn't make much sense to him. Opposite of her, Konohamaru could just make out a steaming plate of food, though he couldn't quite tell what it was. Haku-nichan, he noted, wasn't eating. Konohamaru felt a chill crawl down his spine. Something about the scene bothered him. Something's wrong, he thought worriedly. Konohamaru contemplated knocking, but then he remembered where he was and why he was there. "Ji-chan will yell at me if he finds out," Konohamaru reasoned. Nodding decisively, he made his way over to the railing to make his escape. Ayam raised a hand hesitantly to knock. After a moment, it fell again. Is this really okay? Ayam wondered. If she was being overly presumptuous or intrusive, the faint, fragile friendship she had formed with Haku over Naruto's endless passion for ramen and horrible table manners might never grow. That was something she desperately wanted to avoid. Haku reminded her almost painfully of her best friend. Ayam had not had many friends growing up. Most of them had been accepted into the Shinobi Academy, while she had remained by her father's side. After that, the few friends she had slowly grown apart from her, but she'd still had her best friend. Eri had been a quiet girl, polite and distant, but she was gentle and had a wicked sense of humor lurking behind her polite facade. Ayam had been heartbroken when she had heard of the Uchiha massacre. Eri had not even been a ninja. It had seemed so unfair, and it had left her empty as she'd attended the mass funeral held for the lost clan. She bit her lip. Konohamaru-kun had come by the ramen stand for lunch, which was slightly unusual since the boy was normally supposed to be in class, fairly bursting with some secret. It was getting to be more and more commonplace to see him out of class though. That boy had picked up all of Naruto-kun's bad habits. It had not taken much effort on her part to get Konohamaru-kun to spill his story. Ayam had immediately left her father's, and her own, really, or it would be one day, and rushed to Naruto-kun's apartment, but was it really wise to trust Konohamaru's information, especially given his evasive behavior? It could just be a part of some prank he had in the works. Worry over Haku forced her hand up again. Swallowing, gathering her courage, she knocked on the door. There was no answer. Ayam waited for nearly a minute, shifting her weight from foot to foot, before knocking again. Seconds dragged on. Ayam sighed and was about to turn to leave when the sound of locks being undone clacked loudly in the hallway. Ichiraka's daughter smiled shyly as Haku opened the door. Her smile quickly faded as she took in the younger girl's appearance. Haku's pale and haggard face seemed almost as bleached as the plain white yukata she wore. Her lips were pale and chapped, her eyes bloodshot and underlined with dark circles. "Ayam-san," Haku murmured, confused. Ayam winced to hear the rusty, hoarse tone clouding Haku's normally gentle voice. "Good afternoon," Ayam greeted formally. "Haku-san." She lifted the bag she held in her right hand and presented it to Naruto's friend. "It's not much, but I'd like you to have it," she murmured humbly. Haku blinked uncertainly at her for several seconds. "Ah, yes," she said after an awkward pause, her wits coming back to her. She took the bag gratefully, looking inside. Haku blinked and looked questioningly at Ayam. "Take out." Ayam smiled. She looked away, her fingers fidgeting with her pants. "I thought you might be hungry, and that maybe we could eat together." "Thank you," Haku said softly. "Can I come in?" Ayam asked. Haku hesitated visibly. "It's fine if I can't," Ayam said quickly, hoping that she hadn't pressed the wary girl too far. Haku stepped aside. "It's fine." Ayam followed Haku into Naruto's small, depressed entryway. She slipped off her flat-heeled work shoes, placed them in the shoebox built into the wall on her left, and followed Haku down the short hallway into Naruto's small kitchen. "You already made lunch?" Ayam asked, seeing the cooling plate of curry on the table. "No," Haku denied. "Then that is..." Oh? She blinked. That's Naruto-sama's lunch, not mine. Ayam's mouth worked. Naruto-kun isn't here. She finally pointed out. Haku went still, her back taut with tension. Ayam immediately regretted her words. I've offended her, she thought unhappily. 5 days. Haku muttered. 4 hours and 6 minutes. Ayam eyed Haku with concern. What? Haku turned to look at Ayam, her eyes sharp. Naruto-sama will return, she said firmly. Of course he will. Ayam agreed, bewildered and worried. Haku-san, are you feeling all right? He hasn't cast me aside, Haku murmured, as if trying to convince herself. I'm not a flawed tool. Ayam was starting to become alarmed. Is she having a breakdown? What is she saying? Naruto-kun is only on a C-rank mission, she said soothingly. He'll come back soon. Haku shivered violently. What if he's been hurt? She blurted suddenly, her eyes frantic. What if he needs my help? Haku moaned, wrapping her arms around herself. I knew I should have gone with him. He's fine, Ayam said firmly. Naruto-kun is strong. I know he's fine, and I'm sure it won't be long before he gets back. But… Haku's lips quivered. Her eyes glistened wetly. What should I do? Ayam wondered frantically. I'm not a doctor. Haku clearly needed help, but Ayam felt totally out of her depth. Already the girl had gone through 4 abrupt mood swings, and it looked like she was on the verge of a total meltdown. Ayam stepped cautiously forward, slowly approaching the quivering girl. Haku looked up, alarmed. What are you doing? Naruto-kun is fine, so please. Stay away, Haku whispered, her trembling increasing. Shadows loomed around her, cruel-eyed and vicious. Ayam knew. This woman, this stranger, she knew. Haku was in danger. Frantically, the girl looked around for routes of escape. Her eyes fell on the cutting board. Haku-san, talk to me, Ayam pleaded, coming closer. Haku's hand closed firmly around the kitchen knife. Ayam squeaked, frightened, as Haku brandished the knife. Stay back, Haku hissed coldly. She no longer saw the warm ramen waitress and cook with whom she had begun a tentative friendship with. In front of her was a stranger, a threat. Naruto-sama, where are you? Haku wondered anxiously. Help me! Haku-san! Ayam whispered, trembling. She looked into the crazed girl's blank, hollow eyes, seeing the tears glistening on her long eyelashes. Eri had looked just like that when they had told her that she could never become a kunoichi, eyes filled with despair and helplessness as her dreams were crushed, pleading for someone to make things better. Ayam licked her lips. I have to help her, she thought, determined. But she was not a shinobi, not a fighter at all, and that knife terrified her. Ayam took a nervous step forward. Stay back! Haku shouted, the knife whistling as it cut the air in front of her. Ayam swallowed, stepping forward again. Stay back! Haku begged, tears leaking freely from her eyes. Where are you, Naruto-sama? Please, help me. Haku-san, it's okay. Ayam whispered, her eyes glistening with a tumultuous mixture of fear and empathy. Haku stepped back. The knife flashed out. A thin line of blood dripped down Ayam's cheek. The young waitress whimpered in pain, and it took all of her effort to maintain control of her bladder. I almost died, she thought, chilled. Tears tumbled freely from her eyes. What am I doing? Ayam stepped forward. Zabuza-san! Help me! Ayam swallowed her terror and closed the distance between them. She wrapped her arms around Haku, grasping the other girl tightly. Her heart pounded fiercely as she squeezed her eyes shut tightly. Haku-san, please! Ayam waited with bated breath for the kiss of steel. There was a strange, wet sound at her ear. Haku sniffled. Tears fell freely, and a terrible, keening noise rose in her throat. Haku wailed, the knife clattering harmlessly on the ground, and wrapped her arms around the older girl. Ayam-san! She sobbed. Zabuza-san! Naruto-sama! Where are you? Don't leave me! Please! Come back! Haku-san! Ayam breathed happily, the tension flowing out of her. She tightened her grip on the younger girl. It's all right, she murmured soothingly, stroking Haku's back. Ayam smiled. It's okay. She paused apprehensively and gathered her courage again. That's what friends do, she offered tentatively. Haku looked up. Friends? She asked softly, tilting her head. I've never. She had never dared to hope that she could one day have friends. But ever since she had come to Konoha, the tight control she had kept over her own wishes had been slipping. Can I really have friends? Ayam nodded, smiling shyly. Friends! I cut you! Haku pointed out, her voice small. Revulsion clawed its way through her chest. It's nothing. Ayam dismissed it. I've never had a friend before, Haku offered softly. Her rabbit, Shiro-chan, didn't count, not really. When she had still had parents, when she had still had her innocence, they had lived too far from any other children for her to freely make friends. Later, in the alleys and gutters of Kirigakure, there had been no friends, only others and predators. Zabuza-san was her savior, her leader, her wielder, not her friend, and the life of a Nukenin left no room for them. Now though, was it possible? I'll show you. The older girl beamed. Nodding hesitantly, Haku gave a shy smile of her own. Yes, please. She stiffened, her eyes going blank in the blink of an eye. Haku-san? Ayam asked, confused. A terrified gasp rose in her throat as she noticed the black shadows around her. 4 masked soldiers stood in Naruto's small kitchen, coldness and professionalism wrapped around them like cloaks. Anbu, Haku said flatly. Ayam shivered. Suddenly, the room seemed very cold. You are Haku-san, correct? Their apparent leader asked, his tone detached. Haku nodded, stepping in front of Ayam. What business do you have with me? By the order of the Sandaime Hokage, you are to come with us immediately. Why? Frost crackled as it crawled its way across the polished steel knife at Ayam's feet. Hokage-sama wishes to speak with you,